Welcome to the Select Board's meeting for Monday, March 8th, 2021. This evening we have an agenda that includes a discussion with our State Senator Karen Spilka, our State Representative Carolyn Dykema on legislative updates, followed by a more conventional agenda that includes updates from our Governance Committee, our coronavirus updates from Chief Cassidy, and so forth. I'll look to see if we have members of the legislative branch. Do we have Senator Spilka on? I see Rep. Dykema. Good evening, Carolyn. How are you?
Hi, all. I'm well. How are you all?
Very well, thank you.
Good evening.
And do we have, I see Pooja's on, do we have Senator Spilka yet? Okay.
I think she should be joining us momentarily.
Okay. Pooja, if folks are okay, we're just going to put the meeting on mute for a few seconds to see if the senator can join us. If there's any further delay, then we'll try to take something out of order and then bounce back. So just stand by 1 second. Okay, I'm informed Senator Spilka has joined our call. Good evening, Senator.
Good evening. How are you?
We are all well. Thank you for joining us. We also have Representative Carolyn Dykema joining us. We're very happy to have you back. We were looking back. It's been a few months or so, since I think late September. We want to thank you in advance for taking the time to give Holliston an update from the legislative perspective. You folks have both been extraordinarily helpful to Holliston, and I want to recognize that this evening as we begin. I think in order of comments, Senator, if it's okay with you, I will start with an update from yourself, and then we'll move on to Representative Dykema. We might have a couple of questions following that. Does that sound all right?
Okay, great. As I understand it, there's about an hour set aside in total for both of us and questions. So I will start in with some remarks, focusing on the issues of the day and some of the questions that I believe that are of concern to all of you. So first of all, good evening, everyone, and thank you for having us here today. I am Senate President Karen Spilka, very proud to be Holliston's senator, and I'm thrilled to be invited to speak with you about so many critical issues facing Holliston, including budgeting and school reopening. I want to thank the Select Board, John Cronin, Tina Hine, and Ben Sparrow. Of course, thank you for inviting us. Travis, it's great to see you as Town Administrator. Dr. Susan Kuska, as Superintendent, I want to thank. And I want to thank especially to the school committee led by Chair Stacy Raffi, and Ken of the Finance Committee Chair. Thanks to you and all of the members. I'd like to take a moment to also thank the Health Department, Board of Health, and Scott Moles, Director, and Laura, Tom, and Joshua as part of it as well. And Chief Stone and the police officers and Chief Cassidy of the fire department for all that you do, all of you, every single day. You and your staffs in all the town work so hard under especially difficult circumstances this past year, but you have done a great job keeping the town going. So thank you for your hard work and congratulations. One of my top priorities is getting our students, teachers, and staff back into the classroom, but doing it safely. So I'd like to just talk for a minute or so, or a little bit about that. I believe that the decision going back to the classroom is best left at the local district level. But the decision also is dependent, I believe, on actions taken that the governor and his administration take or do not take. As you know, the administration wants to open elementary schools in particular by early April, and then maybe have the other levels of school come on. I have been very public and very clear that in order to reopen, if they are going to mandate a reopening of our schools, then the administration must have a plan, a specific plan that sets out giving communities the support and resources that they need. For example, there's certain funding and as resources to help set up the physical setup of the classrooms in the schools. There has to be pooled testing or some sort of ongoing testing, contact tracing, and also primary among those resources must be an aggressive vaccine program for teachers and staff. I will continue on my call for the administration to designate a percentage of vaccine doses to teachers, early educators, and staff. Those who are currently eligible at certain CVS sites and will be eligible to sign up for the vaccine through the state starting March 11th, this Thursday. But I will also continue to call that these vaccines be distributed through a local level. And I would highly suggest through the local boards of health. They have been practicing doing just this since 9/11 in 2001. They know what they're doing. They have the capacity. And I want to specifically thank Holliston for joining the regional consortium of 8 Metro West municipalities to propose a regional vaccination site operated by the local Department of Public Health. I was very pleased to join Rep. Dykema in signing a letter of support to Secretary Sutters to advocate for this consortium. And I believe that is the best way to do the vaccinations, particularly in preparation for school, but eventually also for our essential workers, our grocery store clerks, our bus and train drivers, our restaurant workers, our retailers. A lot of these people don't simply have the time to spend 6-8 hours or more on the website because it takes that long. I know personally it can take that long to find a vaccination if you're lucky, and it may not even happen. You may have to start all over again the next day. So I am pushing for clearer communication throughout this process, improved website, more sign-up options, and pre-registration in addition to the local delivery of by boards of health for vaccination. And I will continue to monitor Holliston residents' access to vaccine and hopefully it improves across Holliston and Metro West and the state. On the state level, just a couple of things too I want to mention. Recently, I created, along with the new speaker, the new joint committee. We created 3 new joint committees to meet the moment and the demands. One was a joint committee on COVID-19 and emergency preparedness and management. This is the one that just had the oversight hearing last Thursday. And just for the public knowledge, if anybody wants to send in public testimony, they can email the joint committee at all one word, Joint Committee COVID-19 at malegislature.gov. We questioned the administration and got some answers, but there were more questions than answers, and there will be another oversight hearing probably on March 16th, a week from tomorrow on Tuesday. The fact is, I believe that the administration must deliver a better vaccination experience to our residents who have already been dealing with so much frustration and anxiety. Other priorities for this legislative session, I created with Speaker Mariano 2 additional committees. One, the Joint Committee on Racial Equality, Civil Rights, and Inclusion, which will work to dismantle systemic racism and promote equitable opportunities for all residents. And the second one was, the third one actually after the COVID, Joint Committee on Advanced Information, the Internet, and Cybersecurity that will look at and consider like cyber threats, broadband access, and ensure that we as a state are prepared to capture the benefits of 5G systems. Moreover, on the Senate level, I'm very proud. I established one more committee with a broad focus, and it is the Senate Special Committee on Reimagining Massachusetts Post-Pandemic Resiliency. We know that the pandemic has really upended about every way that we live, work, travel, play. But this moment gives us a rare opportunity, and I believe an obligation, to reimagine our path towards continued vibrancy for our Commonwealth. What do we want our new normal to look like? Let's be strategic and intentional about it and plan it. So ideas about the future will be coming in as a flood, and we need to have a structure to receive and understand and then plan, build a consensus and act. So I can tell you that the session will be busy. We're also looking at completing our climate bill in the very near future, and I'm hopeful it will be on the governor's desk before the month is out. We are doing an elections bill. We will be extending the early voting, mail-in balloting, and the same principles that are in place until March 31st. We will be extending that until the end of June, and then doing a full-blown hearing and looking at ways that maybe we can do some of these things on a permanent basis in the future. We're also, I'm proud to say, we announced that the legislature will be passing a rate freeze for businesses, for folks in town that have small businesses. They were potentially seeing a rate freeze so that we will, on the unemployment insurance, we will not be taxing if somebody, particularly the small business, received from the federal PPP, Payroll Protection Program. They got funds. They will not have to pay taxes on the state level. But we will also be doing something that I've been working on for the last couple of months, making sure that workers have a paid emergency leave. So many workers, particularly our frontline essential workers, do not have paid leave if they get COVID, or if they have to get a vaccine, either take some time off or have a reaction, or they're told they need to quarantine. This will provide paid emergency leave to all of our workers through September during the emergency of COVID-19. One more thing at this time, I'd like to just mention, this time we all know that with student lives, they are all struggling, not only academically by remote, but social and emotional learning. And it's really important that we continue with that, and I'll get into that a little bit later. But I would like to mention, and I'd like to thank actually the Holliston School Committee for prioritizing this issue from the get-go and being so very helpful in my past social and emotional learning forums. I love the way our community comes together here in Holliston. So I want to mention that I am hosting a virtual event on March 19th called Supporting Our Students Through COVID-19 and Beyond. This is in conjunction with the Rennie Center, who work on a lot of these issues. It's my 4th annual social and emotional learning forum. Information is on my website, karenspilka.com, under the section Metro West Kids. So all residents are welcome to join us and participate and listen in on March 19th. Specifically, so I want to thank you for that. I do want to acknowledge, again, the Holliston School Committee and just the whole community that comes together and take a moment. I was very pleased to note that Holliston will be having a farmer's market starting this summer. I know how beneficial it's been to some of the other communities. So I want to thank Bobby Blair and all of you on the board and everybody else involved. I know it's a lot of time and energy, but it's really worth it. So thank you for that. I do want to say that with school, going back to school reopening, we try to stay in close contact, and we try to make sure that we work with the school administration, the superintendent, about the issues that are in need, and making sure that there's pooled testing. And I want to applaud the Holliston School District and its leadership for taking on pool testing as a way to keep teachers, staff, and students safe. I believe that this kind of program is exactly the type of program that is going to be essential in ensuring that schools are able to open smartly. So please continue to let us know how this program is working, and if you need any more assistance with it. Switching gears to the fiscal 22 budget, the 21 and the 22 budget. As you know, the governor recently came out with his budget, and the House goes next in April and the Senate in May. And then we try to do a conference committee in June. As of now, I know the issue of timing has come up. We are planning on doing our regular scheduled timing so that the House would do its budget in April, the Senate in May, and then conference committee in June. At this point, that is what the intent is. And so that will be the regular cycle. Overall, just to let you know, incoming state revenue is it's going to increase. It's surpassing our fiscal 21 projections. We actually increased those projections a few months ago, and it's coming in even higher than those increased projections. The governor's budget recommendation is based on a $30.12 billion consensus tax revenue estimate. This anticipates that tax collections will increase by 3.5% over fiscal 21 estimates. And that is the same tax revenue estimate, the consensus numbers that the House and the Senate will be basing our budgets on, the $30.12 billion tax revenue estimate. So we will all be working on that. And as I said, the increase of 3.5% over fiscal 21, that number is important because that is the number that historically we have been giving increases, that amount. So this year coming up, it would be 3.5% increase for our local aid numbers. And that is what the governor did. Unrestricted local aid increased by 3.5%. So for Holliston, for example, the figure would represent $1.7 million for Holliston for fiscal year 22, which is up from 1.644, which is an increase of almost $58,000 for unrestricted local aid. We are looking at our revenue projections. We have to deal with the $3.5 billion of one-time revenues we used in this current year, fiscal 21. Much of it was through the Commonwealth's Rainy Day Fund, or stabilization fund, which I'm very proud to say the legislature has put a priority on to build up. We had one of the best in the country at 3.5 when this pandemic started. And we took some funding, but we're hoping to keep it at a minimum for next year, but we'll see. Some of what may end up helping keeping it at a minimum a lot would be the federal stimulus bills that are coming. I think on a federal picture right now, hopefully it's looking a lot better than it did a few months ago. To date, total federal COVID aid for Holliston has been $1.517602. That's $1,517,602. State COVID aid has been $86,850. Recognize that the needs are great, not only for the state, but for our local communities, our local funds of police and fire and public safety and transportation, our seniors, our education's systems. I've been in close contact with most of our federal delegation on a weekly basis, sometimes daily, to ensure that they include flexible funding for not only state, which the last stimulus bill did not have for state or local governments. I have been really pushing hard for the federal stimulus bill to include flexible funding for state and local governments like Holliston. So we'll wait to see what has happened, what will happen in both the House and Senate versions. Such funding does exist, along with funding for schools and childcare, higher education, public safety, public transportation and transit, and many other areas. Once it's passed, we will certainly work with Holliston and work with the federal delegation to get into more specifics. But the bills provide, just to give an example, $350 billion for national, state, and federal governments. We'll see what the strings attached include, but we'll get a better sense with that. But I think that will really help the state and the local governments with their budgets next year to make it easier. Just real quickly, Chapter 70. I think most of you know that it has been a real priority for me. That's what got me to run for the legislature years ago. And I was very proud that in my first year as Senate President, we were able to pass the Student Opportunity Act to really finally have adequacy and equity in our student school funding. So the governor did his budget, and I do want to say, most likely that is a floor. We are looking at the governor's numbers for Chapter 70. Under the governor's budget, Holliston would receive a $78,000 increase over fiscal year 21. We'll have to see along the way. We're trying to understand what funding he put in to cover the 7-year implementation of the Student Opportunity Act. The House and the Senate usually tend to be a little more generous with that funding area. So, stay tuned with that. But if you remember, in that bill, we also included extra funding for the special education circuit breaker. So that's another area that Holliston most likely will see an increase. 2 ways we increased the SPED funding. The first was we increased the assumed in-district special education enrollment rate. So that would give Holliston a boost in its Chapter 70 amount. And then the second was separate from Chapter 70. The second, we acknowledge that transportation costs often are more than the education costs for out-of-district placements. So we fully include out-of-district transportation costs for the first time. It's a 4-year phase-in, but I do hope that there will be some funding in our budget so that the schools, including Holliston, will see an increase for beginning to see some reimbursement for out-of-district transportation costs for the first time. So those two issues will come into play. So that coupled with, as I said, a 3.5% increase in unrestricted local aid are the two major areas in the budget for now. I do want to mention and highlight that I was able to get two budget earmarks that Holliston could take advantage of. One was $250,000 for communities in my district to assist in contact tracing and other public health actions in response specifically to COVID-19. And the second one is another separate $250,000 for communities in my district to address unmet mental health needs related to COVID. So please take advantage of these earmarks and funding, and feel free to contact Pooja Mehta, my district director in my office, who I know all of you know, to seek further counsel if you need it. Lastly, well, basically, I just want to say that, as you know, mental health has been really important to me over the years, and I'm really proud that last session we did a lot for mental health reform, and specifically for mental health in children in schools. I'm a very strong believer that successful schools must have robust social services and needs help. And we know pre-pandemic issues with mental health in our children and our adults across the state, everybody was an issue, and it's only cause for more concern now. So in the final fiscal 21 budget, the few things that you should be aware of: the legislature overrode the governor's veto to establish and allocate a $53 million fund in support of one-time grants to school districts to assist with coronavirus efforts, prevention efforts, and to ensure that students had access to high-quality instruction while even though the regular school day was interrupted. So grants can be given out under this fund to things like social services, mental health supports, behavioral health resources, as well as specific costs associated with virtual, hybrid, or socially distanced in-person learning approaches. The budget also includes a $3.5 million pilot program pushed by the Senate for student access to telebehavioral health services while the students are in school, to assist to alleviate the burden on schools by connecting students with behavioral health professionals. So that's another 3.5 million pilot program. Additional investments: there was a $3.9 million for Massachusetts Child Psychiatry Access Project to support quick access to psychiatric consultation within primary care and facilitate referrals for accessing ongoing behavioral health care. $350,000 for school-based bridge programs for youth who have prolonged absence because of hospitalizations for either physical or mental health care. And then lastly, as I mentioned, the $250,000 for communities in my district to address unmet mental health needs. Lastly, just to answer the last question that we recently got about transportation for seniors and vaccinations. This is why I believe they should be done in the community, and the boards of health figuring out either the local senior center, the community center, a school. Transportation would not be as much of an issue, by the way, if we did that. But I know you are eager to learn more about transportation options and offer to help, perhaps through your Council on Aging. At this time, the governor and the administration's vaccine plan does not include transportation to and from any of the sites. Please remember, though, that Mass Health does provide reimbursement for transportation to vaccine appointments. So if the individual is on Mass Health, it could be covered through that way. I know Linda Marshall and her team, her terrific team at the Holliston Senior Center, have been doing a great job communicating with seniors about all aspects of the vaccination issue. I know you've also been in touch with the Metro West RTA, which can provide rides through local taxi and livery services to local vaccination sites within the Metro West RTA service region at no cost. So that will hopefully be helpful, as well as several of the Metro West RTA fixed route buses do service the Natick Mall, where the state vaccination site recently opened, as well as the MBTA. It services the MBTA commuter rail and Green Line stations, where riders can access the state vaccination sites at the Heinz Convention Center in Boston. Eligible riders of the Metro West RTA also have demand response services are also encouraged to book rides to their vaccination appointments through the demand response service within the Metro West RTA region. But I will continue to push for more local vaccination access, particularly for the reasons of the lack of and the difficulty of transportation out by us, and for other things. Lastly, just want to mention traffic. I know traffic has been a real concern for Holliston and all Metro West communities. And one way to address this, in November, the town requested a heavy commercial vehicle exclusion from Mass DOT for Woodland Street. I know my staff and I have been on the phone with Mass DOT many times, and I'm sure Rep. Dykema has too. We worked in, and we both advocated strongly on behalf of Holliston for the truck restriction, as well as mitigation over by South Street. And Mass DOT has informed us via a letter dated February 3rd that they intend to grant this request, especially in light of the schools nearby and the Upper Charles Trail to Woodland Street. And then definitely, lastly, just want to mention Chapter 90, 200 million of capital resources is going to be heard at a virtual hearing tomorrow, actually, March 9th. Last year, Holliston got and probably will get approximately again $510,535. Knock on wood, hopefully, with better weather and road construction season approaching, I'm glad that the committee is taking action quickly. It will report it to the House and then it'll come to the Senate. And I can assure you that it will be done in a very timely fashion when it comes through to the Senate, so that we can get it to Holliston and all of our communities, so you will have it in time for the construction season. With that, I turn it over to my friend and colleague, Rep. Dykema.
Thank you very much. Carolyn, good evening.
Good evening, and thank you, Senator. It's wonderful to see everyone here tonight. Even though we are once again virtual, I appreciate the opportunity to come before you. I first want to just recognize, as the Senator did, all the incredible work that's been going on at the town level in response to COVID. And I think it's safe to say that none of you, regardless of what function you perform at the municipal level, the time and coordination efforts that you've been putting in are extraordinary. And I just want to recognize each and every one of you for that. I will not be too long. As always, the Senator did a wonderful job covering a lot of ground and a lot of the important topics. So I'm going to keep my comments brief so that we have time for questions. One of the things that I did want to particularly highlight were some additional town-specific actions that have been taken at the state level. First of all, there were two pieces of local legislation that we took through the legislature last session. One is House 5092, which is an act authorizing the town of Holliston to establish an economic development program and fund, which was passed at town meeting and then had to be legislatively implemented. So we were able to do that in order to support the town in engaging in more economic development. And secondly, House 4118 was an act authorizing the town of Holliston to convert a certain liquor license. And this was, again, something that was authorized by your board. I believe it was relative to the crafted facility or location down in East Holliston. And so that was signed by the governor in March of 2020. On another note, the senator had mentioned a couple of earmarks, which she had pushed for in the budget. There are also a number of bond authorizations that have been voted on behalf of the town. And I will caveat that these authorizations are simply authorizations, and they differ from earmarks in that there is another step in the process where the governor needs to actually release the funding, but it does provide an opportunity for the town to engage in a conversation around using this funding for local projects. The first was part of the economic development bond bill, which is $50,000 for local economic development. And that would be pending a specific proposal by the town, which the legislative delegation would work with you to contact the governor's office and try and get that money released for the proposed project. And similarly, in the transportation bond bill, there was $1.5 million for downtown traffic improvements. The senator had mentioned, and I know you all have a keen interest in truck traffic, in particular in Holliston. And this would be an opportunity to work with the administration and Mass DOT to potentially get some funding to address some of those concerns. And there's a second authorization in that same bond bill for $500,000 for bicycle and pedestrian safety and mobility improvements. I know all of you, certainly Tina has been very vocal on that, as has the whole board, in trying to increase the pedestrian safety throughout downtown, particularly downtown area. There was, I also just wanted to note, I've been working with Chief Stone. We were able to get a $100,000 earmark in the budget from last year, which actually expired due to COVID, and we were able to get that, make sure that the chief did have access to those funds, even though we had passed the deadline for their use. So all of that $100,000 should be fully able to be expended by the town for public safety uses. On another note, I just wanted to mention, I know that climate and environmental issues are of great concern to residents. I get comments frequently, and I was really pleased. And I know I see Rich Rosenberry and Joan Levinson on the call have been very strong climate activists. And we are going to be passing, hopefully this week, but certainly soon, the climate legislation, which had to be revoted this session due to some objections or I guess changes that the governor did. But we are strongly supportive of very strong climate legislation, and we believe this was a big step forward. I am pleased and proud to have been appointed as the House Chair of the Environment, Natural Resources and Agriculture Committee this session, which is really an exciting opportunity to do more work on behalf of the Commonwealth on some of these issues. And not only that, this new position will certainly give me a better place to advocate on behalf of the town and all of the issues that are important to you and the residents. One other thing I thought I would mention quickly is the Alston reconstruction project, which I know was of significant concern pre-COVID because it would have meant a significant traffic disruption for commuters heading into Boston, as well as potentially a disruption to the rail service. While we recognize that that certainly won't be a problem in the immediate future, we were pleased to be able to secure a commitment from the governor to appoint a mitigation task force to be sure that the residents of our communities who were so greatly impacted and will be greatly impacted by that 8 to 10 year project have a seat at the table very early in the process to make sure that mitigation, not only in the immediate term, but throughout that 8 to 10 year period, protects our residents who will be commuting into the city. So on that note, I will just leave it there and happy to take any questions that you all might have.
Thank you so much, Senator Spilker and Rep. Dykeman. We will start some questions with our colleague, Ben Sparrow. Do you have any questions, Ben?
Actually, all my questions got answered in the presentation, so I really appreciate the depth and the detail that both of you gave to us. And so I'll just take this opportunity to just say thank you for all the help that you provide to Holliston, and we really appreciate how thoughtfully and completely you work with us when we have questions. You know, you brought up our concerns with Mass DOT, and those have been very salient for us. I was teased when I got this position that highway surveyors is on our particular the nature of our board, and actually becomes very important to what we do in many ways. So I just want to say thank you for all that you do for Holliston, and we really appreciate your hard work.
Thanks, Ben. Tina.
Thank you.
Well, yeah, I echo Ben there. Thank you very much for the detail. My hand hasn't hurt like this since my graduate school in cardiopulmonary physical therapy, so I was taking serious notes there. I'm just so impressed by all of your efforts and how directly they impact our community. And thank you for the announcement there on the Mass DOT heavy commercial vehicle exclusion. That is certainly good news for the many, many, many people, including our school-age children, who are going to be impacted by that. So great news. I only had one comment that I'd like to direct towards Senator Spilka, if I may, which is to say that I anticipate you'll be hearing from Leah Robbins at the Metro West Regional Collaborative. She is going to propose to invite you to a joint meeting with the SWAP as well as the MWRC for a fireside chat to discuss, among other things, regional transportation. We're looking to share some common concerns in our community, like congestion in heavy commercial vehicles, as well as learn about progress with the 495 and 90 interchange project and the Alston Viaduct project. So I'm sure you'll be hearing from Leah soon, and I would very much hope to join you in a fireside chat in the near future. And that's all I have, John.
I will make every effort to join you as well and be there. That's exciting. Thank you. I love transportation issues.
I also just have a few questions to follow up on. I guess the first one, Senator Spilker, relates to the revenue estimates that you briefly talked about. You talked a little bit about the state stabilization fund being such a favorable position when the pandemic started. I think you stated we started at $3.5 billion. We have to tap into that for fiscal year 21. Is there any sense that with the trending favorable revenue estimates that you explained to us, that you see the state going back into the stabilization fund for FY22?
Yes, that is a possibility. The governor did to complete his budget. He took more than another $1 billion from the stabilization fund, leaving it closer to $1 billion left. I am hoping, especially with the prospects of, number one, our revenue projections surpassing what we are thinking. And again, we will see what February was a great month. March, I'm hoping, is good. April will be a real telltale month. That's, big tax. March and April are tax for corporations and for individuals, income tax. We'll see what happens. But if we continue to surpass our revenue projections and we get a lot of funds from the federal government, I am hoping that we need to take very little, if any, from our stabilization fund for this coming fiscal year 22. Again, we will have to see what happens, but we waited last year. We had pressure to do our budget in the time sequence that we normally do, where again, the House would have done it last April, Senate in May, and then get it to the governor hopefully by July 1st. We really felt, all three branches, that, and I really pushed, that there was wisdom in waiting. We did not know what was going to happen. We saw so many states have massive cuts in their budget, so fearful that their economy was going to, really go down. Our unemployment rate was high then, and all indications indicated that if we had done the budget then, we would have had to either take a lot more from our rainy day fund, or figured out alternate sources of revenue, or had cuts, or the combination of the above. Instead, we were able to take a reasonable, what I believe is a reasonable amount from our stabilization fund, some new revenue sources, no tax increases, and we not only did not cut items in the budget, but we strategically put more funding. We saw increases in areas that people were really hurting because of COVID. So we increased areas like food security, housing resources, mental health services, services for schools and communities. And I think that really helped us weather the pandemic this last year, and hopefully will lead us to a similar result for next year.
That's favorable and very encouraging to hear. That's great news. Follow up on the traffic remark. As my colleague Tina mentioned, we're happy to hear about the MassDOT movement on Woodland Street. We engaged MassDOT late last year. We had members of your office, Senator, as well as Carolyn, come out with us on a couple of site visits. We'll clearly take on the commercial vehicle exclusion for Woodland when it comes our way, but I will tell you, South Street in Holliston is now sort of the groundswell of where the next exclusion really needs to be centered upon. Our town passed an article in December's town meeting to fund an engineer who is working on that street right now to help us with our application with MassDOT. We understand that because of its impact on Milford, as well as Medway, we're going to have some kind of a cross-community issue. We do have the support of Medway because that road gets into Clark Road in Medway. The residents have been loud and clear to us on South Street. They cannot tolerate the heavy truck traffic that goes down that road regularly as a cut-through. So I guess we're just saying this evening is a sort of a telegraphing, thank you for Woodland Street. We look forward to hearing from you on South Street when we get our paperwork in. It's another critical area that clearly has a significant commercial vehicle impact, and would love to work on that as well. And Senator, I want to thank you again for pointing out those earmarks. The second one you mentioned reminds me that we should make sure that our youth and family services are aware of the $250,000 earmark for unmet mental health resource needs during the pandemic. It's quite likely they are, but when you mentioned that, it made me aware that we should definitely connect with Jackie on that, Travis, okay?
I can have,
Carolyn, I
just want to mention, I can have Pooja Mehta, my district director from my office, who's on this call as well, follow up with you, Travis, and whoever else you think is appropriate.
Great. My last question, Carolyn, you mentioned the two bond bill items. Those authorizations, are they 3 years or 5 years?
Thanks for the question, John. They're at least 5 years. I believe the economic development bill may actually be 10 years, but I can confirm that. But at any rate, they're all at least 5 years.
And as you've made it clear before, we got to have a plan, shovel-ready plan, submit that up through the chain, make sure you folks are on it to ensure the most success for those types of capital project opportunities, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's sort of the advice given around these authorizations is really the best way to do it, since they're not guaranteed, is to really focus on projects that probably would go forward anyway, is kind of the safest bet. And to the extent that the local project is sort of coordinated with state level priorities, whether that be affordable housing or economic development or any of those other things, kind of just increase its likelihood of getting the support of the governor, as does having some kind of local match or funding match for some other source that would kind of show a partnership between the state and local government for the project.
Thank you. At this time, I'll ask any folks assembled on our Zoom call this evening if they've got questions for Senator Spilka or Representative Dykema. Please identify yourself and your address. You can raise your hands now. You will be recognized. Stacy, is that your hand up there?
Hi, yes, good evening. Yes, it is Stacy Raffi, 20 Arthur Street. I just want to, on behalf of the Holliston School Committee, thank you both for your advocacy. We are, as you know, working hard to focus on getting our educators, but also our senior citizens vaccinated and reopening the schools. And we will certainly be in touch with you as we move forward and really try and determine what we need for remediation for our students, whether it's academic or social and emotional. So just a quick thank you for all of your advocacy, and we will certainly be in touch as we move forward through this.
Thank you, Stacy. And thanks to the
Stacy.
whole school committee.
Any other questions this evening from folks on the Zoom call for our legislators? Hearing none. I believe that is the end of our time with Senator Spilka and Representative Dykema. On behalf of the Select Board, we want to thank you again. Very impressive update, thorough and complete. We can't thank you enough for your continued great work. We hope you have a great spring, and hopefully we'll see you all soon. Be safe, and thank you again.
Thank you, and good health, and be safe to everybody there as well.
Yes, good night all. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Good night. Thank you.
A few minutes early for our next item on our agenda, which is the Governance Committee at 8 o'clock. So if I could ask Mike Cassidy to join us quickly for the beginning of a coronavirus community update. We'll see if that takes us to 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock or wherever direction it goes.
Thank you.
Good evening,
Chairman,
Chief. How are you?
I'm exceptional. My preamble can take the full 8 minutes. But our numbers continue to trend the way we want them to. We only have 14 new cases since last Monday. There were 3 cases added on Tuesday, 5 cases added on Wednesday, and 6 cases added today. But the other good news is that we removed 22 cases on Friday from our active list. So they are definitely trending the right way. Currently, we have 14 single cases at single-family homes and 3 clusters at single-family homes. That is where all of our cases are located at single-family homes right now. No more group homes, no long-term care facilities, no elderly housing. So everything right now is all at single-family homes. So,
can you remind me, real quick, were members of group homes part of any previous cycle for vaccination?
yes, they were part of the tail end of phase 1. Some group homes were able to receive. It was easier for the ones that were part of a larger organization through the federal pharmacy program. The ones that were truly independent, single, standalone group homes were a little bit more challenged. But the Board of Health had done some reaching out to them to try and make sure that they were in line to get them when they could.
Okay.
But so far, 7 of our 9 group homes have had cases since last year. In terms of our cases, again, we're trending in the correct direction. We continue to see more and more recoveries and a flattening of the number of new cases week over week. Looking at our percent positivity, the one thing that I would want to note is in addition to us being in the yellow for 6 consecutive weeks, our positivity went up last week to 2%, which for the first time since early December, our positivity was higher than the state's positivity. Their positivity last week was 1.93. We were at 2.0, so statistically very, very close. But again, we were just a little bit slightly higher than the state. In terms of the map and the communities around us, every contiguous community surrounding us is in the yellow still, with the exception of Sherburne, which for the 3rd week is in the gray. In terms of eligibility, and this goes to the question that you had been asking earlier about what groups were in eligible to receive vaccines. As has been noted repeatedly, K-12 educators, child care workers, and school staff, which includes all school staff. They don't have to be in the classroom delivering curriculum. If they are support staff, they are absolutely eligible as of March 11th to sign up for the vaccines. And so I know there's been some frustration in terms of, Chris, if you want to give me the next slide. Some people have been very frustrated by the VaxFinder mass.gov website. At the suggestion of our Youth and Family Services Director last week, I added an additional resource on our COVID page, which is the Massachusetts Vaccine Angels resource page. It's a 2-page PDF, which has embedded links on it, which sort of is a nice overview of what organizations post new appointments on what day, and whether or not you need to be a member, whether or not you need to have a Walgreens account or that sort of thing. It was a nice overview, and for people who have the time to be hitting refresh on their browser repeatedly, it can help you navigate all of the different systems of not just the state website, but some of the private pharmacy and other resources. So that is a link which has been provided to the community and is up on the website. Last week, we were very excited to report that the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, which is just a single shot for the series, had received emergency use authorization. And some of that vaccine had shipped to Massachusetts, and including to a local pharmacy. We did hear from the state on Friday that they are not anticipating getting any more Johnson & Johnson vaccine until early April as part of the state's allocation from the federal government. So that's independent of what's going to pharmacies, but in terms of what's being made available to mass vaccination sites or the regional collaboratives through the state from the federal government, they're not anticipating more Johnson & Johnson until at least early April. And then just a quick reminder, demand is very high and there is a limited vaccine supply from the federal government. Therefore, frequently when people go to the website and try to sign up for vaccines, they are finding that the appointments have already been booked. So be patient. There will be enough supply later on, and just again, patience is the word of the day.
Got it. Any questions, Mr. Sparrow?
I think my main question is, I heard that today there was potentially some guidance on what people should expect and what people should do once they have been vaccinated, like, and what things look like or for them. I am not in that group. I am not privileged enough, I guess. But I'm curious, like, what does that look like for those people who have been vaccinated? What kinds of things they could do? Have you heard anything, or has any information been given?
Sure. The CDC is issuing some updated guidance for individuals who are fully vaccinated. So that means that they have completed their series of vaccination based on the manufacturer. So for either the Pfizer or the Moderna, they would need to have received both shots and been 2 weeks post-second shot. Mm-hmm. For those who received the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, the entire series consists of 1 shot. So it would be after they have waited 2 weeks post the 1 shot of Johnson & Johnson. That's considered to be a series. They would then have a little bit more flexibility, and they can safely gather around friends or family who are also vaccinated indoors without masks or social distancing, as well as visit with friends or family from a single household who aren't vaccinated but have a low risk of severe disease from COVID-19. This is guidance which will be coming out through multiple channels. It's good news for people who have lacked that human interaction, and especially, the ability of grandparents to be able to hug family members. That's great. It's going to make messaging more confusing, and it is going to make some of the interactions that occur out in public a little more awkward. Right now, when you encounter someone who isn't doing certain mitigation measures, oftentimes you're gently trying to remind them of what they should be doing. Now, short of having somebody flash their vaccination card at you to let you know that they're okay to be out without a face covering, there's going to be a middle ground there where people are going to be taking liberties, and other people, because they aren't some of those early groups, won't have the ability to do that. I think there's going to be some more frustration. But it is exciting for those who don't have underlying medical conditions, that they may be able to have more contact with family members who have already received the vaccine.
Excellent. Okay.
That makes sense to you?
I'm all set, thank you.
Okay, Mike, I have a curious question. I don't think it's easily answered, but the path of the vaccine to the arms is enigmatic to me. You just spoke about the difference between state supplied vaccines and other, which I think goes to healthcare organizations. Perhaps you can give us a little bit of insight on that next week.
Yes.
On how folks can expect to see one vaccine heading one way and another vaccine heading the other way. I guess if you were a consumer of the vaccine and you're trying to figure out where to go and what to get, that would matter, and how it's all kind of shaking out. It's very confusing.
The simple answer, but I can give a more complete and link their answer next week, is the best vaccine for you to receive is the one that's available to you when there's an appointment available.
Understood, yeah. Okay, why don't we pause here. We'll bring it back to the community update and any questions after we receive our report from the governance committee.
Absolutely.
So we'll move on to that portion of our agenda this evening, the governance committee update. The governance committee chair, Mr. Tyler, is with us this evening. I see members of his committee. Good evening, Sam. I'll turn it over to you and make yourself available for introductions of your team, and perhaps give an opening update on the activities you've been up to, and then we might have some questions. So good evening, Sam.
Evening. I think I need to start off, this is the beginning of our meeting, going through the protocol of reading the opening statement. So pursuant to the governor's order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Paragraph 20, as well as the Select Board's emergency order dated 3/16/2020, the governance committee will be using remote participation for this meeting. The audio of this meeting is being recorded and will be posted to the town's webpage within 24 hours in accordance with the governor's emergency action requirement of keeping the public informed of actions during this meeting. I would ask that all participants remotely attending this meeting, please state your name for identification purposes each time you speak throughout the meeting. So at this time, we have to have a roll call of attendance of our committee. So I'll start with Len.
Aye.
Paul. Paul, you're muted.
Aye.
Okay. Tina.
Aye.
And Scott.
Aye.
And Sam. Aye. Okay, so we're all set. I think the last time, since the last time that we came before the select board, we had released a draft set of recommendations regarding the budget development process. We had decided early on, for a number of reasons I can get into if you want, as to why we would make that our first initiative. But we did, and as a result, we had one set of meetings with town officials and finance committees and boards, just to talk in general about the budget process. But now, with the recommendations released in draft form, we're going through that process again. And so we've met with the moderator and the town clerk, the finance committee, the finance officers, the treasurer collector, town accountant and principal assessor, the select board tonight. Later this week, we'll be meeting with the town administrator. And we had hoped by now to have also met a second time with the school committee, but that's postponed until probably next week, which will complete that process. And then we'll come back together and as a committee and go through what we've learned from these things and the reaction to the draft proposal, and modify where we think it's warranted, the sections, and then be prepared to have, submit that to the town, well, I guess the select board for the warrant. And we also hope that before that time, that we would have one or two public hearings. So any of the residents that are interested in, what we're recommending. And I should say that that report, that draft report of recommendations is on our Town of Holliston webpage, along with several other documents that are relevant and would be worthy of notice as well. And, obviously when we finalize what we're going to submit, that'll be on the webpage as well. And then we'll undertake a more conservative effort in terms of an educational program between the end of March and, May 10th. Yes, the recommended budget update, we've been asked questions, why is the first recommendation really a budget bylaw proposal? And one of the reasons is that, the Holliston's current bylaws are silent on this matter, on this topic, which has led, I think, tensions among boards, committees, department heads. I think another issue is we now have a new full-time town administrator with direct experience in municipal finance in two other towns, who is now working closely with Holliston's experienced financial officers. The bylaw would also establish a structure or mechanism to ensure that the budget process is exercised consistently and effectively as town officials, board, and committee members change. And that actually was from a number of different town officials we have been in contact with and developed relationships with, primarily town administrators, town managers. That is a point that has been made by them. And then also, I think finally, the reason is from the knowledge that we've gained by our committee's extensive review of the bylaws and charters of scores of the Massachusetts towns and discussions that we've had with other town officials. We're also recommending it as a bylaw rather than a policy, which has been raised with us, because the bylaw would require approval and represent endorsement by the town through approval at town meeting. And this mechanism would ensure that future officials and boards and committees really know their role, and the business of the town would be completed smoothly. So we can get into the details. I know you've all read this, but I don't have time because you have a full agenda. But we thought it would be helpful to sort of summarize quickly what we learned so far in our meetings with other town officials. So I'm going to ask Paul LeBeau to provide that summary.
Thank you, Sam. If I may, it's Paul LeBeau. We heard from the town moderator and the town clerk, and the town clerk pointed out that language empowering both annual meetings to be considered annual town meetings under the state law may be problematic. Apparently similar language was attempted back in the 90s without success. It was rejected by the Secretary of State's office, I believe. So we'll relook at that language. We spoke also with them about the change in dates in the meetings in May and October, and they both seemed comfortable with that. The town clerk inquired whether or not it would present a problem moving the May town meeting back a little bit as far as the accounting was concerned and transitioning to a new fiscal year. But in speaking with the town accountant and treasurer collector and principal assessor, they did not see that as a problem. Both the town clerk and the town accountant pointed out that the existing language in our bylaws regarding the appointment by the select board of fire department personnel uses the word firemen. And so they suggested that while we're making bylaw changes, we change that to firefighters. Most of the feedback that we got was from the finance committee. A number of items were raised by them. I think it's fair to say that some of them were philosophically at odds with the proposal that would start the budget process with the town administrator, move through the board, select board, and then on to the finance committee. They made a number of specific suggestions. One was to change the wording of the appointment of the capital planning committee so it's clear whether or not appointees from other boards would continue on that committee when they left those other boards. They also suggested rephrasing references to town financial officer and school business manager, lest those titles change or new positions be created in the future. They also suggested that we consider adding additional representation to the capital planning committee from other elected boards, such as the park commission, for one example. So we're looking at all of these things that came up. They also objected, members of the finance committee objected to the phrasing that references the ability of the finance committee to seek other information from boards and committees that is public. We added the word public. They felt that was constraining and would limit them in their ability to fulfill their function as an oversight and review board. And I think a couple of the members of the finance committee suggested that rather than this bylaw provision that we've proposed, why don't we just write a bylaw that incorporates the existing budget development process? That seemed to be a theme that recurred. They wondered why we were going to this trouble and why we were proposing a process that would be different from what goes on now. The finance committee, or at least one member of the finance committee, suggested that we compare ourselves rather than to the towns that we selected based on demographics, that we look at, for comparison purposes, towns with elected finance committees. Our research has indicated that there are 44 towns with elected finance committees. The average population of those 44 towns is less than 5,000. And the average tax levy of those 44 towns is about a little over 13 million. So they are significantly smaller than Holliston by a large degree. I think that fairly summarizes the feedback we've gotten from the groups we've talked to so far. As Sam said, we look forward to talking with Travis later this week, and we hope to be able to meet with the school committee sometime next week. All of the issues that have been raised will be considered by the committee starting probably Thursday after our meeting with Travis. And we'll certainly provide information to everyone involved as to the changes we make in the proposal as they come up. Thank you.
This is Sam. So I think, this is maybe simplifies it too much, but just to get us started, sort of the bottom line recommendations we're making is to place on the budget process is to make the town administrator more responsible for budget development and working with his financial team, and that the finance committee would focus on its independent and robust review of the articles and its recommendations to town meeting. As Paul mentioned, we will change language regarding the committee's access to information. And then I guess what the bottom line is that the select board would present the operating capital budgets to the town meeting. So that, I mean, what's important is that taking advantage of, we think, the full-time professionals working in the town that are dealing with finance matters in preparing the budget. There was an issue of whether independently elected town boards that presented its information to the town administrator, which then would be submitted to the select board, meant that the select board would be approving their budget. And I think we're going to add language that makes it clear, it'll be similar to the school committee, where in the preparation of the comprehensive budget, the town administrator would receive all the budgets, but that the select board would not be approving the budget of the independently elected boards and committees. So again, showing that, you know, we're listening to what we're hearing at these meetings and thinking about how we will, you know, react to what would be warranted. And we've made some preliminary decisions, but we still have to work through all this. So with that, I think this is a good place to stop, and expect that we'll be providing more information and responding to your questions.
Great, thank you, Sam. We'll start with any questions with Ben Sparrow.
Thank you. I don't have a lot of questions. I've certainly had a lot of conversations with you, Sam, and I really appreciate your candor and the opportunity to talk to you. I'm not going to get into the specifics of some of the proposals. I just kind of want to make a few comments about some things in general. I have an odd position, having gone from the Finance Committee to the Select Board, so I sort of find myself understanding a little bit of all the sides at this point. But I think one of the things that I really think is important about this process is that I think it's generating conversation. It's sort of thinking about, you know, are we building the best mousetrap? Could we build a better mousetrap? Could we do a better job doing this in the right way? And I think this is important to do. And I think we should be doing this often, just in general. I love having conversations. I love disagreements, and I love having those kinds of moments, because I think it's important to question, why do we do things? I mean, you know, one of the things that drives me crazy in general in my life and business is that, you know, when sometimes people are asked, why do you do it this way? Well, we've always done it this way. Well, does that make it the best way? Not necessarily. Maybe it is. But I think it's important to have this conversation and to start thinking about, are we doing things the right way? And I have a couple concerns about the way we do things now. And I think you've touched on a lot of them in your proposals, but I just kind of want to make these comments in general as you go through this to sort of say, look, you know, please keep these in mind as far as I'm concerned about what I think we should be doing. And I think one of the things that we've done, and we've been guilty of, this board has been guilty of that, and the Finance Committee is guilty of it, is that we take too much time to consider the people in these boards and not think about the future of these boards. And I think, Sam, you touched on it, that we need to make sure that we have processes and we have mechanisms to manage this budget deal that we've put together with the boards that are strong, that are weak, that have completely different people, because we're not going to be here forever. None of us are. But what is this going to look like in 20 years? What are the obligations that they're going to have to be faced with, and make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to do? So with that in mind, I just want to touch on a couple things that I think are very important here in this process that we maintain. And the first is accountability. And I think, you know, of course, all of us are accountable at the end of the day to the voters, because we're voted, we're elected to these positions, and that's important. But it's a lagging, it lags. So, you know, for example, one of the things that I sort of noticed that I found concerning, you know, the Finance Committee brought up the concern about one of the deletion of the term. I think it was no appropriation can be made without a Finance Committee report. I'm paraphrasing, please don't quote that. I'm probably got it a little bit wrong. But I think what I look at that is that I think it's important to hold the Finance Committee accountable that they're producing some kind of recommendation at town meeting, and you put that into a different part of the budget article. And I think that's of critical importance. Is sure, if they don't do their job, they can be voted out of the office, but that doesn't change the fact that we might get to town meeting and not have recommendations from the finance committee. It's their obligation to do this. So it's important that we hold them accountable and we hold ourselves accountable that we're doing the right things and we are making sure that this board is doing what it's supposed to do in managing our departments. And I think the town administrator being in that role that we're talking about is a very important one because he's a consistent actor in this entire process. Because, the three of us are on this board, and I was elected to the finance committee a couple of years ago, and this board has not seen the select board has not seen somebody reelected to it during the time that I've been in government. So there's been turnover in this. So we have to make sure that whatever we put in place doesn't worry about who's in the seats in front of us. So I think it's important to have that accountability. It's important to have some consistency, and a town administrator is a consistent actor because he's going to be there through these different phases and through different boards, and he has the capacity and the ability to pull this information together. And I think it's important that we maintain that because he'll know what's going on, he'll know the departments, and he'll be able to do that. Another piece, and some sort of heard a story someone was telling about budgets, and this is sort of, an observation that I've had, and is that I find it frustrating when somebody has to go through for these department heads, they'll have to go through basically giving the same presentation multiple times. And I'd like to see if there are ways to make things more efficient for them in some ways. And sometimes, I guess, there isn't. But as I'm talking, my concern is that they're providing the same information to multiple sources, and then things change, and there needs to be some sort of system, as far as I'm concerned, that sort of vets and pulls the information together. And to me, again, the town administrator can act in that role to take that information and provide it to the finance committee. And that way we're not getting multiple sources. It's all coming through the same source, and we're making sure we're all talking about the same thing. We're singing from the same sheet of music. And I think that kind of efficiency, I think, is an important piece as well. To think about these department heads, like, are they doing the same thing over and over and over again and having to because of the nature of the system that we've put in place? And and the last piece there is transparency, is making sure that we can see what's going on and everybody understands and the residents know what's happening and they can make sure that we're doing our jobs, of course, and holding us accountable, of course. And I think it's important to look at it that way. So the last thing I'm just going to say about this is that I just want to also make sure that we're cognizant of the fact that some change needs to take place. I think it's a good thing to update, to change, to make some adjustments to things as technology comes into play, as new ideas come into play. We don't need to have, the classic example is we don't need to necessarily have a legal notice in a newspaper because no one's reading newspapers anymore. Well, maybe a few people are, but basically they're probably in existence basically to handle legal notices. It almost seems like that kind of a process. But I want to make sure that as we go through this is that some of these changes, maybe we don't do all of them, but let's not make the perfect the enemy of the good here. And let's make sure that we are making some good changes and working towards those changes and then revisiting it. The idea is that, you're doing some great work here and putting together some great ideas and bringing in all sorts of sources to put together a product. But that doesn't mean that this is the end. This is the beginning. This is sort of like a process that Holliston needs to engage in. Maybe not every year, maybe not every 5 years, maybe it's every 10 or 20 years or whatever it is that we decide to do, but it needs to be something that is looked at and thought about consistently, and it should be almost, I'd almost argue that it should be almost in the bylaws themselves if we're going to have these kinds of elements, like every 10 years the select board, I'm making it up, the select board needs to put together a governance committee that's going to evaluate the efficacy of these laws and what changes need to take place. I don't know what it looks like. But thank you for doing what you're doing. I appreciate you listening to me rant, I guess you could say. And I really just want to emphasize the fact that this is about making sure that Holliston can continue to function at the highest level possible for years to come. And we have to put aside who is in the chairs of these committees and start thinking about what do we want to tell the future generations. The greatest legacy we can leave is a functioning town for the future, not just making sure that we function at a certain level right now. So that's all I have to say. So thanks again, and I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Lee.
Thank you, Ben. Tina?
This is Sam. Let me respond, Ben, to one thing you said in terms of the need for change. From talking to those who've been in town for many years, it appears that really the town of Holliston has not undertaken a comprehensive review of its government structure or efficiency for over 40 years. So it is time to be looking at change. And in that time, and we heard a little bit of the, if you were part of the first hour of this meeting, from Senate President Spilka and Rep. Dykema, in terms of the issues that are before the town. Local government has become more challenging, more demanding, requiring greater efficiency to meet service demands and changing conditions with limited revenue growth. And to put it in perspective, it's good to understand that this year the town's budget, operating budget, is $64 million, and that supports 795 employees. So complex government, bigger government than maybe what we're used to. And what we've also found from our work dealing with other towns is increased professionalism in town government and related structural changes has been the response by many other Massachusetts towns in recent years. And to the last point you made, Ben, in a number of bylaws that we've read, there's a provision that every 5 years, the select board creates a bylaw study committee. So, and I think we should point out that our tenure is 3 years. And so this is really just the first initiative. We've got basically 3 years of town meetings mapped out of issues that we'd like to at least take a look at, see if there's change that should be made. So thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Tina?
Yeah, I think the first thing I'd like to do is just thank the governance committee. You made an important distinction that I just want to highlight again, which is the language will be clarified to further highlight that the select board does not approve with any of the changes that you're proposing in these bylaws. The select board does not gain the ability. We do not approve budgets presented by an independent elected board. So I appreciate you clarifying that. I think that's an important point. And then I had a question when I sat down to review the bylaw recommendations. The question that first popped up to my mind was I wanted to know that the financial team in Town Hall got an opportunity to weigh in and that their feedback was incorporated. So I'm very pleased to hear that you've met with the town treasurer, the town moderator, although that's governance and not financial management, but the town clerk, the town accountant, the town administrator, and will be meeting with the school committee, and you had a chance to meet with the finance committee. I also especially like that you will have two public hearings to hear from our community as well, because I do think people are going to be very interested and want to know the due diligence, the robust process that you took to coming up with these recommendations. So that was my biggest question, was to what extent was the input of others sought? And I'm more than satisfied with the work that has been done so far. For me, I would bookend my comments because I would bookend the process. I was specifically looking for in the new article, the budget development process, that there was an opportunity early on for the three major boards in that largest part of the budget, and the finance committee had an opportunity to meet. So I very much like the language. I think it's section 2 of the new bylaw that has the first Monday in October, that has the finance committee sitting down with the select board, sitting down with the school committee, the town administrator, the superintendent, and the business manager to prepare the budget message and prepare the budget outlook for the upcoming fiscal year. I think that's critically important. And I think that shows the kind of dialogue that we perhaps have not had, at least consistently year over year, that really benefits the budget process. So I was very glad to see that. So that's the start of it. The end of it is town meeting and the presentation given by the Finance Committee. So it's important to me. I think like Tina Lingham here, I think of the entire group here, Tina, you and I probably have the least experience in terms of this municipal process of budget development. And so we have probably more experience as town meeting voters. We know what it's like to go to town meeting and to hear the Finance Committee make their recommendations. And that's a direct comment I also got from somebody in the community who reached out to me after reviewing this to say, the chair, Ken Shada, has been very clear and focused in making the Finance Committee recommendations on the town budget at town meeting. Nothing in here changes that. And that was something that I went through and double-checked, and Sam, you and I have had some conversations, and I'm pleased that that has not been changed. The Finance Committee, in Section 5 of that new article, continues to present its recommendations to town meeting and shall be given first opportunity at town meeting to propose amendments, if any, to the town budget. And I think really that's what our community is going to be looking for. It's one of the greatest values when they go to town meeting is to hear those recommendations from the Finance Committee, and I don't see that changing. And that was important to me. I don't have any other comments at this time. I think you guys have done a great job. I think you are a fantastic group of experienced individuals who put in a tremendous amount of time and have a fantastic product to bring to town meeting, and I appreciate your work. That's it.
Well, let me respond. Thank you for your comments. And yes, I think we have talked about the need for transparency in the budget process. And so in our proposal, we are including a requirement of the Finance Committee to have a hearing. Once it's completed its work on the budget, the Select Board to have a hearing as well. And also at the end of the process, when the Finance Committee has finished its recommendations, for the Select Board and the Finance Committee to meet to talk about the budget and any differences that they still might have. Hopefully by then, most of the issues are reconciled, and if not, they are at that meeting. And maybe another reason why we started with the sort of the budget process, but to also get to your point, Tina, we sort of added up our collective years of experience in municipal government. It came to over 100 years. So we've all been in the trenches for a while on this matter. And it's not just also looking at and talking to those in Holliston. It's also been valuable for us to go to other towns in reaching out to, the town administrators or the town managers or finance directors and discussing issues with them in terms of their town and bringing that back. So all that collectively has been helpful to us in sort of finalizing these recommendations. I don't know if this...
Well, you all show your 100 years impressively well.
Thank you.
Paul, if I could, kind of on that topic and going back to Ben's suggestion about regularly reviewing these processes, if you could push that review cycle out to about 20 years, then I won't have to worry about getting a call from Sam to serve on the committee, because I don't think either of us will be around by then.
All right. Well, thank you. I just have a couple of quick comments to make. I wanted to first, obviously, compliment your group on a fine product in draft form. I know it's still undergoing some edits after meeting with certain groups. To confirm that the governance committee was formed by the Select Board, I believe, for a 3-year term. Is that correct, Sam?
That's correct.
The scope of the work that you folks are intending to tackle is just beginning. It is not a targeted agenda to look at simple financial bylaws for the purposes of one outcome. If I recall correctly, you're going to eventually make your way to all 4 corners of our town government, our bylaws, and our enabling legislation. And you intend to come back through this board over the next 2 years or so with further recommendations to try and improve the delivery of governmental services to Holliston and make recommendations again for further changes. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So folks should understand that this is just the beginning, that it will reach all the dimensions and touch all the areas of town government in a way that I think will help us all have that fulfilling understanding of how we can be better and govern better. I think I have to compliment you all also on the breadth of the listening that you've been doing. The committee to date apparently has had multiple singular meetings with, of course, your own group, but not only have you met with us, you've met with the Finance Committee at least twice, I think, the town moderator, the town clerk, school committee. You've already met with school committee once, is that correct? And the next meeting will be
correct.
The second one? Yep. And as Tina pointed out, you have reached out to schedule public hearings over the next 2 weeks before our warrant closes. Is that correct?
That's our intent, yes.
Okay, great. So from where I sit, the board, the committee rather, is doing exactly what its charge intends, and that is to reach out and understand, not just empirically through the data collection that you and your team and Paul and others have crunched and presented, but also hear and listen and make amendments and changes as necessary. As I look at the changes that you gave us back on, I believe it was February 11th, one of the things I wanted to note, Sam, was you had proposed several changes to bylaws. Could you just help me understand how many bylaws are being touched or recommended for amendments at this time?
Again, this is Sam. Well, I think the budget development bylaw is a new bylaw, so that's not a change. Article 1, a town meeting, we're trying to provide a little more time for the budget process and recommending that the annual town meeting in May be the second Monday in May as opposed to the first Monday in May. And then in the fall, we're basically cleaning up language, which is a little archaic, and just suggesting that the fall town meeting start on the first, or I should say the third Monday in October. So that's Article 1. Article 3 is the select board, and we're just making very minor suggestions for change. There's a section in Article 3 dealing with appointments, and it has to do with the police chief, fire chief, and others. And it does not reference the special act of the town administrator. And in that special act, the town administrator has a role in the appointment process in a sense that the screening of candidates is undertaken by the town administrator. So we want to note, just include special town acts in the language. And we're also looking at the language in the Finance Committee's bylaws that provides a sentence where the Finance Committee is required to provide a page in their report or its report that would allow residents to volunteer to serve in various capacities. We're looking at what we've seen in other towns, particularly Andover. We're recommending a new bylaw, a new section to the select board's bylaw that creates a talent bank, electronic talent bank that would be much more robust, provide much more information in terms of available positions and responsibilities, and make it easier for the public and the residents really to volunteer. There's a somewhat of an electronic system on the website now, but it's what we're looking at is much more robust. So that's for the Article 3, the select board. And then Article 4 is the Finance Committee's bylaw, and we are making changes there more because with the budget development bylaw, there are provisions for the Finance Committee, and in some cases it's expanded or or better explain the responsibilities of the Finance Committee. And so it's replacing some of the sections that are in the Finance Committee's bylaws now. And you know, we've already talked about a section dealing with ensuring that the Finance Committee receives the information that it seeks in terms of its work. So that's covered in that will be covered in the budget bylaw. So that's how that will change. Article 33 will, by our recommendations, go away because in the budget bylaw article, the draft, we are creating a capital planning committee made up of 7 individuals in town. Most of them, it's going to be very similar to what's there now, but the Article 33 it creates a subcommittee of the Finance Committee to be a capital improvements committee. And we're basically providing that this new capital planning committee basically does a lot of the groundwork and prepares drafts for a 5-year budget improvement plan, as well as the capital expenses for the operating budget for the ensuing year. And that would then be submitted to the town administrator, and the town administrator would make the final adjustments and then make the recommendation to the select board. So because of it being covered in the new budget bylaw, Article 33 is not needed, and so we will recommend that goes away, and that's pretty much it. I mean, the bulk of it is the new budget development bylaw, but other articles, 3, 4, and 33 will be affected, but that's the extent of it. Because this is really solely about the budget development process. We'll have to, wait for other town meetings to address other issues outside of that.
Thank you, Sam. Speaking of the capital piece, the capital planning committee, the recommendation that I would pass along, in addition to the ones I know you received from the Finance Committee, which I concur with, there was some clarification of roles with people that are elected and so forth. I do think that planning committee needs a chairman. I would recommend that your committee think long about making the town administrator the non-voting chairman. That will give, as Ben said, lasting life to the committee after elected people come and go. There needs to be some continuity and ownership of the product. And as a non-voting chair, the town administrator would have a more continuous interest in making sure that the product evolves and gets passed along as content for upcoming and continuously coming and going members. So please consider that recommendation as well.
We will consider that. We do provide for an election of a chair and a vice chair of the Capital Planning Committee by the members. The idea of this came from our review of other town budget bylaws, and in our review of those bylaws, I don't think we found one where the town administrator or the town manager was the chair of the Capital Planning Committee. And I think the sense for us was that we've actually saw some towns where the Capital Planning Committee created the budget and was the body that made the recommendation at town meeting. And so the town manager or town administrator wasn't involved at all. By our recommendation, what the work of the Capital Planning Committee would be to submit its information and recommendations to the town administrator, and it would be the town administrator that would make the final recommendation to the select board. So we would expect the town administrator to be involved, but not necessarily the chair. But, we'll go back and talk about this and go back to, other towns again and we can make a decision as to how to proceed. So thank you for the recommendation.
Our board has asked our questions. At this time, I'll turn to the Zoom. We have several participants this evening. Give them a chance to ask your committee some questions. If there are any, I would ask people to raise their hand, announce their name and address, please. If you have any questions, now is the time to ask. All right, we have hearing none at this point. We will move on, Sam, from our work with the governance committee this evening. We want to thank you and members of your committee for joining us this evening.
I was just going to say I'll see them on Thursday.
You will see them on Thursday. That's right. You're going to be meeting with the town administrator on Thursday. We expect to see a product in a couple weeks. We'll take votes on that as we get closer to the warrant. And just to echo my colleagues' comments, exceptional work, really well done, very thorough. It's hard work, and we appreciate all the effort to date to every member of your committee. Thank you very much for all your work.
Well, I should just end by saying this is our 22nd meeting. And Travis will try not to be so repetitive in terms of the meeting with you.
No, I look forward to it. Let me know if there's anything I can bring that will help the conversation. Otherwise, I look forward to it. The 23rd meeting.
I don't know if anybody else on the committee has a final comment they'd like to make.
Nope, you've summed it up well. Thanks, Sam.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
All right, thanks, folks. We'll move on with our agenda. We'll ask Chief Cassidy to rejoin us. We were just getting wrapped up with the coronavirus community update. So if you want to join us, Chief, we'll see if there are any questions on the coronavirus community update from those assembled on the Zoom call. I think you had concluded that portion. So let me just double check with the public as we reset the participants here. I see some people going and coming. Any questions on the coronavirus community update that had previously been done by Chief Cassidy? We move on to the CARES Act programmatic update. Hearing none. All right, Chief, let's get into the CARES Act programmatic update portion of the agenda.
Okay, so in terms of the change on the CARES Act spending since last week, we did just have one expense that was posted to Munis since last week, and that was within the hiring and training category. So you see that both in the listing as well as the next slide, which is the graphical representation. And again, for the last several weeks, we've been including the graph on the weekly update that is published on Thursday evening. In terms of our requests for funding this evening, I have two for your consideration. The first one comes from the Facilities Director, and this is a request for $2,400 to cover the replacement of air filters at the Holliston Police Department. This is for both through-the-wall units in individual offices as well as the rooftop units. And again, part of the workplace safety standards is ensuring that there is proper air exchanges taking place in the workplace, and part of that is making sure that we have the correct filters in place and that they are being changed with frequency. So this would be an unbudgeted item to make sure that this doesn't negatively impact the police department's operating budget.
At this point, any questions on this, or do we want to move directly to a motion and a vote on these? Do you want to make a motion, Ben?
You all fit, Dan?
I am, yep.
All right, I'll make a motion to approve $2,400 for air filters for the Holliston Police Department to be paid for through the CARES Act.
Second that.
I have a motion and a second for $2,400. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That carries. Excellent, Ben.
Great, and the second one is hot off the presses. This just came this evening from the Youth Advisory Committee through a unanimous vote. They are requesting a third round of rent mortgage relief funding to be administered as it was with the previous two rounds. They're requesting an additional $25,000, and has been highlighted by the Youth and Family Services Director. Through the previous two rounds, the community was able to help 27 families, and this is a vital role that the town has played to be able to help people stay in their homes, which of course can reduce stress and can make it easier for children to learn. And this is one of the allowable uses of the funds. And as has been highlighted previously, this is not the only source for rent or mortgage relief. There are other state and federal programs, and the folks at Youth and Family Services, working together with the Holliston Community Action Fund, ensure that any applicant gets the best fit. So if this funding is not the best source for them, they may be directed to a different resource that's available, and they make sure that there is no supplanting of other programs, so that if they are receiving certain funds that would make these funds not eligible from CARES Act, they make sure that they're keeping an eye on that through their application process as well. But this would just be one leg in a multi-leg stool to ensure that people who are facing housing insecurity are able to stay in our community.
I note that, go ahead, Travis.
I would just point out, I had mentioned the other night, because there was some interest on the Finance Committee call about this, that I thought this would be coming to the Select Board more likely on the 15th due to timing of the meetings. And in the past, we have specifically called this out on an agenda item. So not to sway the conversation, I think the conversation certainly could take place now. I would just think next week may be a more appropriate time to take the vote, unless there's a specific need that would be more time sensitive.
I note that Jackie Weiner's on our call. I was going to see if Jackie wanted to add any other details to the program. Good evening, Jackie. How are you?
Hi, good evening. No, I do think it's time sensitive. I do, but I'm also willing to wait until Monday if that needs to be an agenda item. But, you know, this is something that really can't be delayed. You know, these are funds that are put out by the CARES Act money designed to go towards rent and mortgage relief. Each town can decide if they want to apply it towards rent and mortgage relief, or as you saw in the previous slides, how it's been used in other areas in the community. And so I think it's really important that we understand that people are behind the 20, there are, you know, we help 27 families, but those 27 families are people, are humans, and they have, you know, sacrificed a lot in the last year, and there are more hurting in the community. And so while I appreciate, you know, the logistics around how these votes happen, I obviously would vote that it happened tonight. But that is something that is obviously needs to get discussed among the board to make that decision. I'm happy to answer any questions about the rent and mortgage relief program, how it's done. As Chief Cassidy mentioned, there are two state programs, RAFT and IRMA, and we just want to make sure that people know that those two programs exist, because you can't use both. You have to choose one or the other, and the state programs definitely have a lot more resources available for people. So it's something that we've been getting guidance on since the very start. You know, I put together the guidelines in the application and took it off, you know, the town's, as the town's responsibility to oversee this fund. And I've done my own due diligence on how these guidelines work, how we allocate this money. And so it's pretty well established at this point. We do have families that have called us asking about it. And so, you know, a couple days is a couple days, but for some people that's a lot of time to go by, you know. We're at the beginning of the month. It's the perfect time to start to help people in this current month that we're in, instead of delaying it another month. That only pushes people into April when it comes to their repayments for the month. So, you know, some people have a 2-week grace period. We might be able to help some people in the month of March, but if you push it out a week, we're talking about April and May, being able to help people. So my vote would be that it gets talked about tonight, but I'm also willing to wait if that's what's needed.
Jackie, I think it was last week, perhaps it was the week before, I thought you gave us a little bit more detail on how this program's going to change or act differently this time. It was something about the nature of the awards, nothing repetitive. Could you add some more detail or bring us back to that remark? Because I think that's important to note. This would be the third round of grants, and we are evolving on this program. If you could talk about some of those learned examples or changes that might be evident in this next round.
Yeah, we started out with a maximum amount of $5,000. That's what the CHAPA guidelines had suggested that we offer. They also suggested that we be able to go back 3 months in time at that point to be able to help people who had gone into forbearance or hadn't been able to pay, and be able to support people. So people could decide if they qualified for the maximum amount, how they wanted that money to go, whether they wanted it to go back a few months or to be current. We were only able to help 9 families that month. Not that that wasn't successful, but what we decided to do for the second round was pare that money down a little bit and make it so that it was only available to help for 1 month at a time. So we took it from a maximum amount of 5,000 down to 2,000. And in the third round, we may intend on staying at a maximum amount of 2,000. Doesn't mean that every person who qualifies for rent and mortgage relief qualifies for $2,000. It depends on your household size. It depends on how many bedrooms you have, what your rent amount is. If your rent amount is over $2,000, you qualify for $2,000 or whatever your rent amount is, or whatever your mortgage amount is, nothing over $2,000. And so we were able to double the amount of people we helped in that way. And I participated in a training with CHAPA after the first round of funding. And most of the guidance that we received then was, don't make your application too complicated. Don't make it hard for people to not be able to get the help that's needed for them. And so if you start making the application process more trickier, if you start requiring more documents, if you start pulling people's W-2s from 2019, it's not going to accurately reflect people's current state of need. And so some programs go by area medium income, like the state programs RAFT and IRMA. And certainly if you meet the state income, and they've lowered that so people can qualify, so more people can qualify. We want people to know that those resources exist. We want them applying for those programs because you can get upwards to $10,000 for more than 3 months. That's the maximum amount you can get with a RAFT or an IRMA program. And so our guidelines aren't changing. Our allotments aren't changing. We're just making sure that we've changed our guidelines is what I'm trying to say. And how we have it is working for us and is bettering the community and is supporting more people. The only thing that we want to highlight this round is making sure that if you qualify for those 2 programs, that you go and apply for that program instead of our program, because you're going to get a lot more and you can't go back and forth between the 2. So that's the main piece with this third round.
Thank you, Jackie. Any questions on this, Ben, at this point from you?
I just have one quick question. Just to understand the timing of things, is the intention that we would have this program available for a period of time, say 30 days, or is the intention to have this program in place until the funds are expended?
Typically, because we don't get to pick when it starts, it's been since the funds have been expended. We had a deadline last round of December 31st, so we had to have a hard stop a couple of days before that deadline. I would really like to see when this program rolls out, it align with people's current needs and not have to be pushed out or pushed back or made to be so that people have to skip a month and then play catch up when they come back for more support.
Okay. Well, you good? Tina?
Yeah, Jackie, I just have one question, then a comment. Does having a third round, does that open up an opportunity for you to reach new families, more families that may not have come forward to learn? They may not qualify for rent and mortgage relief through the CARES Act, but is this another opportunity for you to start a dialogue with a family that wasn't aware of, I'm going to get it wrong, but RAS and IRMA?
Yes, yep,
Okay,
yep,
so
exactly, yep.
all right, so in going with the third round, you have another opportunity to educate more people who might not have known this information prior to this third round?
That's right, right.
Okay.
Yep,
And I would
so,
argue, go ahead.
no, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Tina.
Floor is yours, Jackie.
I was just gonna say that this has been more than just sitting with families and seeing if they plug into the guidelines that we have. It's been, if they're not qualifying for rent and mortgage relief, we're helping them with a utilities bill, we're helping them with a mental health need, we're helping them with a school piece. So it's the counseling around this is often a very small factor in a whole host of other things that happen when a community member is calling for support.
And I would just make a comment to John and Ben that in my opinion, we made the decision already as an agenda item to support rent and mortgage relief. And in making that commitment, it was to meet the need when it arose. And here we are with the need before us. And again, I already feel like through an agenda item many months ago, we made that commitment. And so I understand Travis's comment about having it on the agenda so that the community can weigh in, but I do feel like we've already had that discussion and have already made a commitment to address the needs of people suffering through the pandemic wherever they pop up. Mm-hmm. So I just see this as an extension of that commitment we already made to rent and mortgage relief.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. All right. Thank you, Jackie. At this point, I will ask Mr. Sparrow if you'd like to make a motion for the item that Chief Cassidy has laid before us related to youth and family services.
I'll make a motion to allocate $25,000 to youth and family services for rent and mortgage relief through the CARES Act.
I have a motion to have a second.
I'll second that.
Any discussion on that? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That carries. Anything else, Chief?
Yeah, I did want to point out one additional data point. Last Thursday, I was on a webinar with the Mass Municipal Association entitled Tracking Federal Relief Funds to Municipalities and School Districts. And I would draw attention to the highlighted section in the top right corner of the slide that the Coronavirus Relief Fund guidance was first published in April 2020 by ANF, and since that time there have been 16 updates or changes to the guidance. So there's been a lot of change. It's very fluid. Things continue to change, but just as a footnote also, I did file our third reporting period paperwork with ANF by Friday afternoon, because Friday at 5 o'clock was the deadline. But just a reminder that as with all government programs, the rules sometimes change in the middle of the game, and we've tried to stay on top of it.
I'm sure your after-action report will speak to the need to trim that down the next pandemic.
Yes, absolutely.
Something along that line.
100 years from now, hopefully we'll have a very different process.
Any other questions for Chief Cassidy this evening on the CARES Act programmatic updates?
None.
Hearing none, Chief, you are relieved. Thank you, sir.
Absolutely.
Have a great night.
Time for warrants, Ben.
Anything in the yellow folder for us?
Yeah, we have one warrant. There's a warrant here. I'd make a motion to approve the warrant for $641,768.72. Of that, $170,188.66 is town payroll.
Second that?
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That carries. Public comments, Ben?
Yeah, I just have one thing. So I had a conversation briefly with our sustainability coordinator, Matt Zedek, and he just wanted to provide a little bit of an update on something that we had talked about a couple months ago, the compost initiative with curbside food waste, and he just wanted to give a quick update and maybe just to get it back out there to get people aware of it too. So we had begun in October with 180 households using black earth compost, and basically the initiative is the more people that are added to it, the more we get a reduction in the cost for each user. So the town is providing additional incentive to new subscribers if you want to sign up for this program to provide a 13-gallon wheeled curbside cart and a bag of cart liners at no cost. The town is paying for those cart liners from a grant that we received. Basically, we're trying to get to 500 households, and for a 6-month rate, it drops by 33%. It was already been reduced by 10% because of people who have been signing up. But as of today, we have 365 participants. So we basically doubled the subscriptions over the past few months. And so we still have another 135 to get to 500. If people are interested, there's a flyer describing the program on the sustainability page on the town website. And they're certainly able to contact the sustainability coordinator directly. As an added bonus, the Black Earth Compost, the group is, they're donating 5 cubic yards of finished compost to the Holliston Community Farm to help them. And if people are also interested beyond that, you can also pick up a home compost bin through the select board office for $22. And they'd be able to compost if they want themselves, if they're interested. So that's all I got.
Great. Great update. Thanks, Ben. Tina.
No, I would just like to say that I think Ben Sparrow has a second career as a QVC salesperson. So. Nice job on that update there.
Yeah, but I'm not selling Swarovski crystals.
Well, some might argue in the sustainability world that compost bins are the equivalent.
Perhaps.
I'm all set on public comment.
I don't have any public comment. Anybody on the Zoom call this evening have any public comment to make? Speak now. I mean, I can say that Vin Murphy's profile picture looks exquisite. Now, he looks like he could be on QVC.
Perhaps.
That's a great looking.
I just wonder if he comes up, what exotic location is it?
I know. Well, you'll have to tune in tomorrow night.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he's going to keep it secret.
Gotcha.
All right. So hearing no public comments from any other folks assembled on the Zoom, we'll move on to comments from Travis Ahern.
Thank you. A couple of things. I just wanted to point out, as we get towards the end of the month and next week, we'll transition to discussing the warrant for the May 10 town meeting, that there is, the IT director has updated the citizens petition online to now be fillable, whereas it used to be something that you would print off and people would hand write and then send back to us. It is now fillable, a PDF on the website. So let me just show where that would be. There we are. So if you go to town links, town meetings, all the way to the bottom, town meeting article form and petition. This is now able to be filled in, written, and handed back or sent in electronically to the select board's office, the town administrator's office. And those are due, if you're going to submit something for the May 10th town meeting, those are due by March 29th at 4 p.m. And one other thing I wanted to mention is that next week, again, we will be looking to finalize the conversation on the Front Street one-way. I will reach out to the individuals who have reached out to us with feedback on that. We've had the original open forum. We've had another discussion on it, and the intention would be to show a number of parking scenarios that have been discussed, the one-way, and if the select board is comfortable voting that as a permanent change to a one-way for Front Street.
You said next week, you think?
On the 15th. And lastly, one thing I wanted to update, as this is going to now start to be circulated a little bit for the beginning of feedback, is that the 9 Green Street group that was hired through the December town meeting for engineering and design services, the 9 Green Street parcel in the downtown area. The first step that they have due to the town is going to be for a demo plan, and the way that we have the contract written is that information will get to us in time to be considered for the warrant for the May town meeting. At the same point, what they're doing is starting to look at long-term conceptual designs. Again, this is not the primary focus of what PAR is doing at the moment for us. Their primary focus is the demo, but I just wanted to sort of share beginning conceptual designs to show, one of the things I've heard back on the demo is, so we're going to knock down a building with no plan. No, there are other designs and concepts being developed. The demo is the primary concern that we have right now, is the building is essentially a liability. But I just wanted to share this. It's also been shared with the EDC, who's going to have it on their agenda this week to discuss, as 9 Green Street has been on their focus as the downtown is consistently on their agendas. So the first I would just show, and again, I'm not going to get too into it, one of the focuses has been on making sure that there is green space. As you can see here, where my arrow is, this would be the maximum amount of parking. Hold on one second, I'm having issues. Whereas if I go to the next one, you can see potentially we could, and you see it get phased in over time there. But so the most parking here with these 6 spots, but then potentially instead having green space, maybe starting out with green space. Then if the businesses demanded more parking over time due to need, it could always be added in. Those are the sort of conversations that are going on at the beginning with our discussions with PAR, all at the same time as the demo plan is being developed and should be coming to you shortly for consideration on the May 10 warrant. And those are the things I just wanted to update you on briefly tonight. I can answer any questions on those, or we can move on.
Are there any questions for the town administrator on that topic from folks on the Zoom call? Hearing none. Any other updates, Travis?
That's all I have.
All right. We'll move on to the FY22 budget and revenue review.
All right. So I think what we can do is take a look at where we are with the total budgets, or we can start with Chief Cassidy, who has been brought back after his February 25th for some more questions from the Select Board based on previous feedback from you.
Let's start with fire and ambulance.
Okay.
Folks who are watching, this board did defer on the fire and ambulance budgets, but we did, I believe, take a vote on the emergency management budget. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So we're going to receive Chief Cassidy to give us an update on some resources for fire and ambulance. Round 2.
Thank you very much. Yes, in response to some of the feedback that was provided on February 25th, I was encouraged to go back to the drawing board, and we had talked conceptually of the challenges of historically over the years continuing to meet a guideline budget and a level service budget when the needs of the town may expand and change, and therefore I had been encouraged to come back with some additional changes. So if we look first to the proposed additions to the fire department budget, there were 2 based on feedback that I had received. The first would be a new initiative, which would be for some part-time clerical help to assist me with some of the paperwork burden that I have been carrying historically since I lost the head dispatcher position in fiscal year 13, and that would be not to exceed 19.5 hours per week, clerical assistance, and that would be the amount of $22,943. And then the second request under the fire department budget, above and beyond the level service and level budget request that I presented on the 25th, would be for the restoration of a part-time inspectional services. And this is something that also had been eliminated due to budget cuts back in FY04. It was a full-time position that went from 40 hours to 35 hours to 0 hours. over the course of 3 years where there were austerity cuts that were required. I do not believe at this time that in our current operating environment that it would be appropriate for me to suggest this to be a full-time position. I am confident that since these are duties that I am currently doing in addition to my other administrative duties, that I would be very comfortable shedding some of these on a part-time or per diem basis. And so the request would be for $24,021, again, for part-time, not to exceed 19.5 hours per week. That's it on the fire side.
Any questions, Mr. Sparrow?
Yeah, a couple questions. Where would a part-time clerical assistant be housed? Where would that person be working?
They would need to work out of the fire station because for issues such as ambulance billing or payroll, which is largely the area where I could definitely use some help, because right now we're still a very paper-based payroll system, and I'm preparing that on a weekly basis for myself and for the dispatchers, and I'm preparing it on a monthly basis for the EMTs and the firefighters. So they would need to have access to our logs to be able to confirm based on from pay slips who had attended, be able to look at our records management software to determine and confirm who had been at incidents. So that individual would need to be at the fire station.
And there's a place for them to be able to do this?
We can work out those arrangements, yes.
And you had mentioned for the inspector that you're doing the inspections at this point? So that's basically the model we're using right now, or you're doing?
Yeah, so prior to being promoted in 2000 to the position of fire chief, I had held the full-time firefighter position, which the duties and responsibilities were inspections and code enforcement. And so I had been doing the inspections for 5 years under my predecessor. When he retired and the previous board appointed me to my current position, I was able to backfill that position. And for a couple of years, I did have someone, as I indicated, who was full-time, 40 hours, 35 hours, and 0 hours. But when we had to eliminate that position due to budget cuts, I took those duties and responsibilities back on because it was something I'd done for 5 years, and so I was familiar with the codes, I was familiar with the processes, and because there weren't the funds for it to be done by someone else, I needed to take those back on.
Good. Tina, any questions?
Well, just one, would the inspector then, for this restored position, would they serve another role within the fire department as you did when you were doing these duties before you were promoted to fire chief? So is this a firefighter who steps in and takes this on as an additional position within the fire department, or is this a new hire, someone who isn't already working with or for the fire department?
Ideally, it would be someone who is already in the organization who could take this on as an additional duty and responsibility, because the learning curve would be very short. They would already be familiar with the community. They would already be a town employee. But if an internal candidate couldn't be identified in accordance with our bylaws, then absolutely we could go outside and find someone. The challenge would be to find someone from outside the organization who was willing to do this on a part-time basis. The only way that might possibly pan out would be somebody who may already be doing this on a part-time basis for another smaller department and would sort of commit a couple hours to one department on certain days during the week and would commit to us on another. But we've got a lot of roads to cross before we can figure out whether this is an internal additional duty and responsibility or whether this is a brand new hire.
Are there certifications or specialized training that's required? I'm just trying to think of every year we appoint individuals to certain lists of positions, and some of those have certifications. I don't think any of those fall under the work that you're doing here as an inspector, but I'm just wondering, number one, is this a new appointment that would have to come? That's just housekeeping, but more importantly, is there special certification or training that needs to go on?
Sure. Under Mass General Law, it would be a delegation of authority from me to the inspector. They would be working under my authority statutorily. There is certification that is available for fire inspectors in the Commonwealth, and that can be obtained through the Mass Fire Training Council.
Okay. I don't have any other questions, and I appreciate you doing the deep dive here and pulling forward these two positions.
You good?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Chief, I have a couple of small questions relative. You mentioned the clerical role that this individual will play as part-time, so it's non-benefited. Is this a position you see in a perpetual need going forward, though? Or is it just somebody catching up and helping you establish a more regular and updated paperwork processing system?
In an ideal world, this would be something that would continue moving forward, because even if we had a more automated system using more software-based, someone would still need to process the payroll. And this is very similar to several other departments who have clerical staff who do the preparation of the payroll when it's being submitted to town hall.
On the inspector side, does the fire department collect fees for these types of inspections that they do?
We do.
Where do those fees go?
General fund.
I see. So, any idea of how the fees cover this particular role? Is it partial? Would it cover what you're asking for? What is it?
It would partial. It looks like in fiscal year 18, we brought in $17,000 in fees. In fiscal year 19, we brought in $17,600, and in fiscal year 20, we only brought in $12,000. So it would partially.
Okay, more than half, anyways. I was taken during our last budget discussion about the position we find ambulance and fire in. I got a sense from the risks that you announced in your budget that the fire department was reaching a point where, although you're trying to achieve benchmarking, give us what we asked for, we were leaving things out, that the services were starting to creep into an area that I was personally uncomfortable with. I think this modest restoration gives us the sense that we're going to get a full-time fire chief back to some extent. It won't be waylaid by some of these administrative tasks. But I think looking ahead, Mr. Hearn, I think it might be time to have a more focused view of the way the fire department is operating. Earlier we talked about the governance committee having a multi-year view of how town government works, and I'm not willing to say that we need a full-time fire department tomorrow. I don't think that's what I'm trying to get to. I'm trying to get to whether or not our fire department is achieving its best value to the town through the kind of training and equipment that you desire. I mean, the chief's a great manager, but I'd like to have a closer look, third eye, if you will, on are we getting out of it what we are putting into it, or should the citizens expect more or less? I mean, just a value check, if you will, on how it's going over there. I think it's one area of town government that we just cannot go cheap on, and I think we need to be very mindful of the resources we give that organization.
Do you mind if I just make a point to that?
Please go right ahead.
And so one thing that was mentioned, actually, I was having a conversation with Ms. Stein earlier. We do have the DLS tab group coming in to look at our general government operations at some point this summer, so that would be an opportunity to bounce that off somebody who obviously looks at a number of towns and would be able to benchmark us. Generally speaking, for more specialized eyes on something like this, there's certainly groups, MRI being the most prominent call-in center as well, that if we were going to look as a town at our operations, there's certainly people who can do that for us. I would think that a centralized look under the select board budget, professional services to engage somebody of that nature is probably the way to go, rather than have it under fire. We would want somebody looking sort of outside in, and so I think that's certainly something that we can discuss, whether it's 22 or not, but in this conversation by the end of tonight or by the end of this month.
Any other questions this evening on the fire department's budget from anybody assembled on the Zoom call? Hearing none. So we have before us the revised requested fiscal year 22 budget for the fire department, which includes these two part-time positions, Chief. Am I reading this correctly? You're asking for $932,454?
Correct.
Would Mr. Sparrow be interested in making a motion to approve that FY22 request?
I'll make a motion to approve the fire department budget of $932,454 for fiscal year 22, the budget request.
I have a motion and a second.
I'll second that with the comment that that is a 5.3% increase over last year.
Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, that carries. Chief, thank you. We'll move on to the ambulance budget, which again was another look back.
Yes.
Tell us where you landed on this one.
And I completely agree with your comments to the town administrator, and it was very consistent with what I heard Mr. Sparrow saying earlier to the governance committee, and I don't want to be locked into the answer of this is the way we've always done it. But at the same time, I believe that there is still value to our current system. And so obviously there are radical changes that can be made. There also can be some more modest tweaks to our existing model. So in terms of the going all in and completely changing the way we currently staff our ambulance and ensuring that we have dedicated personnel that are on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, around the clock throughout the whole year, what I did was I built out a model that would compensate our personnel at the current rates that we have for EMTs and paramedics, which is approved in the current pay compensation chart that is approved by town meeting. And so those rates range from $22 an hour for first responders and EMTs, up to $24.39 an hour for EMT paramedics, and basically just staffing the ambulances the way they are right now, which is a 3-person crew. Also building in the capability for us to compensate people who are in our field training program, because if we hire new people, we need to onboard them, and they become a fourth rider for certain shifts until they have achieved proficiency and are familiar with our procedures and our equipment. So that all in 24 hours a day, 365 times 2 shifts at 12 hours apiece, plus the intermittent field training program participation, came to a figure of $636,015, and that would be one piece of a larger solution based on all of the feedback that was received a couple weeks ago. That would only handle the first ambulance going out the door, and that's why I had the $32,387, which would be a reallocation, which would be for people who are off duty and need to come in for the second truck. Because sometimes we have concurrent calls. And that is the same system that we have right now. First ambulance goes out, and sometimes we're able to send our second or sometimes even our third ambulance to meet the concurrent emergency medical needs of our community. Another thing that had been discussed during the 25th budget hearing was trying to incentivize people to be actually at the station. And talking to some of our personnel, some people would be open to staying at the station. Others would still prefer to stay in the comfort of their own home. And so I proposed an additional new initiative, which would refer to a shift differential. And that was $64,125, which for an individual who opted to remain at the station during their shift or during a portion of the shift, whatever they were committing to, that would be an additional hourly compensation for those that were committing to being at the station so that they can ensure that the truck rolls out the door in an expedient fashion. And then lastly, because the question that had been raised earlier was what level of service are we offering and where are we now, where do we want to be in the future? Years ago, I had carried a very large amount for EMT training for years. It was not used very often, or it was certainly not maxed out, and therefore as budget guidelines came and budget guidelines went, and as oversight boards or committees that were making recommendations to town meeting would look at what I requested versus what was actually expended, they basically told me, you're never spending that much, you really should lower that. And so I have historically, in recent years, lowered EMT training amount. The last restoration that I had suggested in my all-in Plan B budget proposal here would be an additional $35,000 to incentivize those who wish to take more advanced training and certification, which would be paid upon completion and certification. And I know that's a lot to absorb between my new initiatives, my reallocation, and my restoration, and I'm happy to answer questions. And that is the high ceiling. I recognize there is also a floor to this discussion, but here we are.
Matt, any questions?
Yeah, I got a couple.
Only a couple.
I know, right? Well, they're bigger picture questions. I think, so one of the questions I asked you last time on February 25th was sort of thinking about, is this the right model? And, you know, the answer might be yes. And I think it kind of gets to maybe, you know, I don't know if I'm comfortable completely changing everything right now here like this. I'd like to sort of see, like, you know, how does this play out? How does this plan out? How does this move forward? What is the long-term prospects of it? Because I think it needs to be part of a long-term plan. So that's kind of my comment there is this the right model? Do we have a plan if we're trying to change the model? And then the third question is do we have the resources to execute on the model? For example, I've heard, you know, I don't remember who said it, I don't remember how I heard it, but I've heard that, you know, the facilities we have downtown may not be really adequate to have several people basically sleeping there. And if that's not the case, then, you know, going immediately to that model might be a real challenge logistically without a real a plan in place, just physically where we're going to put them. You know, that kind of gets to my original question about the clerical help in the fire department. If you know, if you're taking away there, then someone's sleeping under a desk. I don't know, and I mean not to be facetious, but so I know I said a lot there, but basically my question, is this the right way? Do we have the means to do it? And if we're moving towards something else, what does this look like?
I don't know if this is the right way. And I would echo what was stated earlier, both in terms of your conversations a week ago with the police chief with regards to everything is baselined off of the strategic plan, your conversations with the governance committee saying it's good to have somebody come in from the outside and periodically review what's taking place, the comments that were stated earlier, and followed up on with the town administrator. I absolutely believe that this is not something that we would want to jump into hastily, and I certainly would be in favor of an independent third party looking at this. I would be happy to explore multiple models, and whether that is, again, improving the compensation for our existing on-call personnel, whether this is something as radical as regionalization and sharing resources with another municipality through an intermunicipal agreement, whether this is, you know, again, is this a service that we should be delivering to the community, or is this something that we should be outsourcing? You know, there's a wide range of answers, and I'm not sure that in 10 days between when this was raised as a let's come back and take a second look at your proposed FY22 budget and where I am here today. I've been doing this, you know, I've been working for the town for almost 30 years. I've been with the department my entire municipal career. I recognize what works. I recognize what doesn't work. I work with a lot of colleagues in other communities. I know there are different models that are out there. But just like when I heard the governance committee responding to some of the feedback from the finance committee with regards to who they were benchmarking against, I think it's important that when we benchmark Holliston, that it's against a similar community and not necessarily just the population or just, you know, median income. I mean, there are a lot of factors, and which is why, again, somebody coming in from the outside and studying this intentionally, I think is a good approach.
Well, and I certainly would, I echo that sentiment, but I think that you're leaving out one very important piece, which is are the people, the residents, getting what they want from what they're spending? And if the answer is, even if it's benchmarked against another town, that's certainly a good place to start. But if people feel like there's room to grow, or there's a gap here, we need to meet that, even if they are benchmarked, even if we're benchmarking in the right place. And I think that's really important that we recognize that how the residents getting what they feel is the adequate level of service from what we are. And my answer might be yes, and I'm not trying to say it's no. I'm just trying to say that we have to take that into consideration.
As a pre-hospital provider for close to 30 years, I can tell you that I am extremely confident in our ability to respond, treat, transport a patient to the appropriate location, and ensure that they get the definitive care that they need. Even as recently as this past fall, we had two very serious calls where the patients, based on our tiered response, again, first responder police officers, basic EMTs in our ambulance, ALS intercepts from a variety of different models, were able to successfully transition a patient who had no pulse and was not breathing to the point where their heart was still beating on their own and they were breathing on their own, and we delivered to them to the hospital in that condition, and they were later discharged still in that condition. And so I'm confident that we can deliver the service that's needed when someone calls 911.
Absolutely. Okay, that's great.
Good. Gina?
One question on this unscheduled overtime.
Yes.
Is that tied to, as a reallocation, is that tied to a decision to the new initiative of compensating EMTs at their hourly rate?
It would be, so because I was trying to move things around in our existing budget lines, I tried to capture the second concurrent medical, or people coming in to fill out a first medical. So that compensates someone with our existing structure at our existing pay rate. So if they come in, they're guaranteed a minimum hour and a half.
Okay. Was this what you presented, this unscheduled overtime? I remember you presenting the shift differential, and I remember you presenting the EMT training as two items that you thought about for your budget, and then I believe did not include because of the budget guideline. Was this unscheduled overtime one of those items?
So that is a new title for a previous request, which was titled 5112. That was 5112 regular salaries. So if you look at my February 25th draft budget, that was 32,387. Because under our current model, 51117 EMT base salary, that's the stipend that members receive for the shifts that they commit to and work.
Okay.
And then the 51112 regular salaries is the hourly for people who either stay late or are called in off duty, either to fill out a first ambulance shift or to staff a second or third concurrently. So that was just moving it to a different line so that I could reflect better what the all-in budget was.
Okay, and then the second last question is really a comment. I like the idea very much. I like the idea of pulling in an outside reviewer. I like that you embrace that. I think that's really important, that we would be taking a step that with your experience you support, and that you sounds like you actually encourage that outside look. I like the idea of having planning based in your budget to make adjustments where they recommend it. So that's how I'm envisioning this, is if this budget were to be approved and go to town meeting and be approved by town meeting vote, that you would then have the ability to plan for recommendations that would likely come out of a review, and that the review would endorse what you're proposing here today. So there's this sort of feedback mechanism, which I really like. I don't necessarily see this as, if we pull the trigger July 1, all of these things are in place, because I hear what you're saying about Ben's question. You don't know what's going to work, and you're open to the idea of a review. So I like giving you that flexibility on these, especially the three initiatives. I don't like the 700% increase in regular salaries. I don't think that this board ever approaches the budget in that way, and I take your point about 10 days ago we weren't looking at a 700% increase. So that resonated with me. So I don't have any other questions, and I appreciate you going back and doing the work again to come up with these ideas and present them in this way.
You good?
I am.
All right, Chief, I'm going to echo a question that Tina got, because I don't think I got a clear answer. Of the items that are shown, EMT training, shift differential, unscheduled overtime, and then the salary and the base salary offsets. Which ones are mutually exclusive? EMT training stands on its own?
EMT training stands on its own.
Shift F?
Shift def, yeah, that is something that if you're looking at floor plus incremental at, May town meeting, shift def could be a good first step to try and incentivize more people to stay at the station when they have the ability to.
Unscheduled overtime?
That, again, is just a reallocation of an existing,
Got it.
and that would have been part of my base budget.
Got it. So my personal spec is, this all-in Plan B shows that there's an area within, in this case, the ambulance services, that could use a fresh set of eyes, in terms of value, return on investment, all that kind of good stuff. I do not feel as though we have the space to go all in, on this option. But I'm inclined to try to support some areas that give you the kind of incremental space that I think you need to achieve on a budget that was so bare bones on February 5th, we sent you back to the drawing board. So the shift differential and the EMT training appealed to me. Both of them, I believe, let's see. So the EMT training is in the 5,300 line, which is good because you could move that around if you didn't spend it, correct? And where's the shift? The 5,100 line, you could use that in any number of different areas. So the combined increased costs are just about $97,000. Is that correct? Between the two of them, the add. So it's according to numbers that I have, you're looking to add $64,125 for shift differential, and 33 even for EMT training.
Correct.
So that would be a total of $97,125.
Correct.
Exclusive of elements of revising, revamping your EMT salary model.
Correct.
Okay. Got it. Thank you. Any questions on the Zoom call for Chief Cassidy's proposed revised ambulance budget for FY22? Before we move here. I can't see who that is. Is that?
That's Captain Pierce again.
Christian Pierce. Good evening, Christian. How are you?
I'm very good. Thank you for having me again.
No worries. It's mind.
I support the in the short term to boost his ambulance funding. That's going to help with your recruitment and retention in the short term, while we come together as a group over time and figure out what's the best model moving forward. I'm not a budget guru. I'm only a captain. So, I don't know what the right number is in the short term, but I think everyone realizes that we do need to have some sort of, boost in the FY22 budget to help keep EMTs in the seats of ambulances, which is where we need them in the town. I also support having a third party coming in and reviewing the operations just to see, fresh set of eyes. Could we be doing better, more efficient, better value? So I agree with those sentiments. And I also agree on the inspector and the clerical. I do inspecting for a living for Westwood, and I'm busy 40 hours of the week. And I don't know how the chief does his chief duties and everything else he does and do inspections. I mean, that's a lot of work. So I'm glad that we're having that dialogue about, where we want the department to be in 3 years, 5 years. So I support as a taxpayer, any increase to the ambulance and fire budget to help the department, with the growth in town. And I'm here as a resource and a guide, and any committee or any kind of working group you want to put together in the future, don't hesitate to call on me. Thank you.
Thank you, Christian. Any other questions from folks on the Zoom call this evening? Hearing none. Okay, so we have before us a proposed revised FY22 ambulance budget that is totaling $1,024,866. What is the board's pleasure with respect to the increases that Chief Cassidy has put forward this evening? Start with you, Ben. Any thoughts?
I don't really think we wanna, throw the baby out with the bathwater at this point. Pardon the metaphor. I think I do lean towards what you're talking about, the $97,000. If we maybe add in the EMT training and the shift differential, maybe adding those two in as a starting point, and then we, find a means to, look at what we're doing, make sure we have the resources we need to get the right model, and then put together a plan to execute on that. And it might be sticking with what we have, but I think we need to, let's take a look and see if there's a different way to do things. So that's my personal preference.
Thanks, Tina.
I was just saying, do you want to put the overall view up for context, or do you want to hold
No,
on?
we've got it right now. Go ahead, Tina.
I absolutely support Chief Stone's original comments from the 25th that suggested.
Although the police chief is very supportive of our efforts.
Pretty soon I'm going to be calling you Elizabeth, you William, you Anna, and you can change my first names because we're getting to that time of night where I'm that tired. I support.
They're calling you all Harry.
I support the suggestions that you brought forward with your original budget of the 25th that you were not able to include because of the budget guidelines. I support the shift differential and the EMT training. I appreciate the fact that that gives you flexibility in your FY22 to make changes alongside, before, after we have a third-party reviewer, which you, as I said before, seem to embrace. So I support those two, the $64,125 and the $35,000 addition to the budget that you'd originally presented back on the 25th or 24th.
33,000.
Yes,
35.
it becomes 35.
I already had two in February 25th model.
Got it.
I concur with my colleagues. Mr. Sparrow, would you like to make a motion at this point? We have to.
Yeah, I can. I'll fill out the math because I just did it. So just to sort of say, like, this is what I came up with, and just like people can correct me. So what I did is I took the $481,726 that was appropriated for FY21. I added in $64,125, which is the shift differential in line 51402. And I added in $33,000 additional dollars for 53017 EMT training, and I came to a total of $578,851.
You say the total again?
578,851.
Did you pick up the increase in the dispatchers and the increase in the in-service also?
No.
That has been in my base budget.
So the one you presented was the original budget you had.
So it's really the original budget plus 33,000 for training and plus 64,125 for shift diff, right? That's what you're talking about?
That's because I looked at his budget. His original proposal was $481,726. Right. That's why I added the.
I agree with your.
$97,125, which gives me $578,851. And I'm willing to make that motion if everybody.
So actually, what we could do, Chris, you have the original budget. This is the revised one. If you could go back to the other PDF that has the original budget, this is what he's talking about. Scroll down to page number 2, sorry. Thanks, Chris. So this total is the $841,726. We're talking about making the line EMT training 53017, which is 2,000. That would be made 35,000.
Yeah.
And then what does not exist on here would be adding a line for shift differential for 64,125. That would not have any history to it because it would be being added.
All right. He has a motion.
I will second it.
Okay. Is there any discussion on that? Hearing none. All those in favor of 578,851, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
That's your revised FY22 from the Select Board, Chief.
Thank you. I head to the FinCom tomorrow evening.
Grateful for your work and efforts, and
appreciate the support of the board. And as I indicated earlier, I'm happy to have someone from the outside come in and look, and happy to be transparent and deliver the service that the community needs.
Outstanding. Thanks, Chief. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Mr. Hearn, anything else on the FY22 budget and revenue review you wanted to touch on this evening?
If we wanted to look at a big picture, we could certainly do that. Actually, Chris just pulled it up, so why don't we leave that? I will add to this the conversation that was just had, which would be an addition, the addition for fire that was voted this evening and the addition for ambulance that was just voted. And then if you scroll down a little bit, Chris, we will be relatively close there on the bottom line of what was currently projected. What I've plugged in here, everything from budget requests 01122 through 01692 is all the budgets that the general sort of departmental budgets plus, you know, the reserve and those types of accounts. Nets out pretty flat, as you can see. A lot of that has to do with the fact that the reserve account was substantially higher in FY21, so that certainly helps. Debt service drops, county retirements based on Mary's final numbers, which you've reviewed and voted. Employee benefits also reviewed and voted. The schools and Keep Tech, those are based on the initial budgets that I received. I believe that they are being reviewed now. The tax court articles we can discuss, but that has a number of things that we know are coming for raise and appropriate, plus the, you know, contributions into the CapEx and stabilization funds we do on an annual basis. Other amounts to be raised are things like overlay and then offsets to the cherry sheet. So we're pretty close right now. I will factor in now the changes that were made for fire and ambulance. One thing I would say that we could certainly take a look at, if we're now, you know, a little bit too tight, would be something we had discussed, was removing the $34,560 from facilities management that was specifically for custodial services for 2 times a day COVID cleaning. We could certainly talk about removing that from the facilities budget to help offset what was just discussed in the ambulance budget that I believe will bring this in line.
I'd like to hear a motion to amend the FY22 facilities budget as Mr. Hearn just described.
I will make that motion.
I'm not going to second that because I'd rather. So I'm not opposed to taking it out. I'd like to have the CARES money allocated for it if we're going to do that.
Mm-hmm.
From the available CARES Act.
Yes, that would be then I would be comfortable doing that because then at least I know, and we can always change it down the road. But I just don't want us to be in a situation where we don't have funding for this.
Do you want to go, is your thinking to go back to the CARES Act discussion and make a motion to do that? Is that what you'd like to do now? Or would you want to?
We can do it next week.
I think we could do it next week.
Yeah,
I think it's,
have the chief initiate that.
Yeah.
And any other similar, I think we talked about a couple smaller hanging fruit that,
That's the one that certainly draws out the most. We do have, obviously, IT will be having the continued support, which we know we want. We can continue to charge the CARES. At the same point, I think, you know, part of the conversation on some of these is that it might just be a new level of service that we want to build into our budget, right? We probably are going to want that part-time IT person.
solid waste.
The solid waste is another one that, again, we may just be seeing a change in the behavior of residents, but we also could be factoring in CARES if we want to.
And I specifically. I feel comfortable allocating CARES for this particular, the facilities piece, because it's contingent on how things are going with CARES. It's probably, I would say it's a reasonable thing to assume that, you know, it's not going to be something we're going to be doing forever. It's not going to be a long-term, versus some of the other things, like I would argue that some of the IT help and things like that might be more of a permanent kind of.
You know what we'll do, Ben, in the interest of covering all the bases, we'll ask Travis to get back next week with Chief Cassidy.
Yep.
Assess the IT, facility maintenance, which is the one you just brought up, Travis, and solid waste.
And if there's any others too, there might be something else.
I think those are 3 you called out anyways, for possible CARES Act funding for FY22.
This is a big number, which is why I bring it up, John, if I may. Public health, for the Board of Health, we have 18,000 on our CARES list for public health surveillance, which I believe is that the MAVEN service for contact tracing and so on?
So, yes.
And that will be, we anticipated, I believe, from a previous comment that I think, Chief, you had made, that would be in the Board of Health budget for FY22. And so that would be, we haven't seen that budget, but that would be one, because it's a big number.
I don't think I hope I suggested to the budget. I think that they may have had other sources for it. There have
You
been
got a grant.
state
Okay.
grants. And then we also heard the earmark earlier from, the senator, that there's, funding available. Hopefully we can realize it.
My memory has it, there was, and clearly my memory is failing, but that, there was a 9,000 in there for the Council on Aging too.
In any event,
But
I
any
think
event, right.
it's still homework. If you could circle back, Travis, and make a report to us next week, because I think there's some interest on the board of moving these costs off of our ledger onto that. So, we'll deal with that next week. All right? Fair enough?
Good.
It's in my motion.
All right. And is that it for FY '22 budget and revenue, Travis? Anything else this evening?
Yeah, there is one slight change. The EDC has not changed its bottom line, but they're talking about changing sort of the structure within. They'd like to, and so they have a meeting this week, which is why, it's late, so I'll bring it back next week as well, since we'll have further budget discussions. The other thing that was mentioned, the clerk, has a position that would impact, is looking to change the structure of a position that needs to be posted shortly, that would impact 22. The clerk has brought that to the attention of the liaison to the select board and the finance committee, and it's something that ideally we have the conversation and get some clarity on sooner than later, because we would like to post the position, and it's a question of whether or not the position is posted at 18 hours, which is what it was previously, or 25 hours, which makes it benefited. I suspect that conversation will also be taken up tomorrow night, so it's something that, again, I can bring back next week for further discussion. But it's something that I think would be really helpful if we could, all as a town, come to an agreement on, so we could post that position. So EDC and clerk are the other two that I will be discussing next week as well.
Thank you. Let's move on to our agenda, under board business. I'll entertain a motion to approve the meeting minutes of February 22nd, 2021.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, that carries. You want me to do this part, Ben, or do you want to do the executive session piece?
Do whatever you, I'll
Go for it, go for it.
So I'm going to make a motion to approve executive session meeting minutes from June 30th, 2020, September 9th, 2020, September 29th, 2020, October 2nd, 2020, October 5th, 2020, October 26th, 2020, November 2nd, 2020, November 12th, 2020, December 7th, 2020, December 18th, 2020.
I will second that motion.
I have a motion.
So, sorry, those are for approval but not release.
Approval or not release, yeah.
I have a motion and a second for the approval but not release of the meeting, executive session meeting minutes as read by Mr. Sparrow. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, that carries. Next item, senior center donation, Beth, first one?
Okay.
We've got a couple.
Yeah, there's a couple of them. Okay, so the first one is, I'll make a motion to, accept a $100 donation to the Senior Center Nutrition Revolving Fund from Phyllis Higgins, and the purpose is a thank you for meals.
I will second that.
All those in favor say aye.
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 That carries.
And the second, one is, from, there's no name received from, so I guess anonymous. It's a $100 donation to the senior center for meals received. So I'll make a motion to accept this $100 to the nutrition revolving fund for the senior center for meals received.
I'll second that.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, that carries. Event permits. Couple of those. First one is the Senior Car Parade on May 23rd, 2021.
They should be in the packet if they're not in
I
the.
can read them if
I know, I'm looking at it right now, sorry, I'm just, I will make a motion to approve an event permit for the senior car parade, on May 23rd, 2021.
I will second that, and give me one,
I didn't say it's the Holliston High School senior car parade. The place too.
Okay, I'll second that, no comment.
I'll look at it real quickly. Starting at Woodland Street, campus following a route determined by Holliston Police, ending at Holliston High School. It looks like the event will be held on May 23rd from approximately 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So I have a motion. You have a second on it?
Yes, I do.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye, that carries. And the next one, an event permit for hazardous waste day. Ben, if you have that one.
All right, so I will make a motion to approve an event permit for hazardous waste day, hazardous waste collection day, scheduled for July 10th, 2021 at the Robert Adams Middle School.
I will second that with one comment question for you, Travis. We approved the solid waste budget that had additional money for this hazardous waste collection day. It was my memory that the day was extended, and so the addition, we went up and...
I believe 12 p.m. is an extension from 11, and I believe it also has to do with looking...
Started earlier. Started at 8 instead of 9.
Oh, I went the wrong one.
So the extra time that's in that budget is in this notice? Okay, then I second that.
I will have one comment, and it's echoing the remarks made by Chief Stone here, that all participants and volunteers for the hazardous waste collection day follow local and state orders as pertains to social distancing and the wearing of face coverings, such that they will still presumably be in place on July 10th, 2021. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That carries. The next one is an appointment, Ben. Do you have that one?
Yeah, so I'll make an appointment, we'll make an appointment to the Open Space Committee, so I'll make a motion to appoint Ms. Emmanuel Schwartz to the Open Space Committee for a term that expires on June 30th, 2023.
I will second that with a thank you to Ms. Schwartz for volunteering.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
It carries. Incidentally, the hazardous waste day will be held at the middle school, as it has, I think, forever, right?
Access through 515.
Okay. Okay. All right. Any other board business this evening, Mr. Stroud?
Just a quick thing that when we talk about warrant articles, we want to talk about DPW facilities. So if you have any ideas on the scope or comments on what you'd like to see in a new facility, let us know. I talked to Sean about it today, and I just wanted to bring it up to your attention, just that that's coming up, and I'd like your feedback at some point.
I thought we had put together some level of scope on that.
There is something from Stantec. There was an actual proposal, but I want to revisit it, and I want to make sure that it includes everything. And basically, I want to look at it like, let's get it with all the bells and whistles, and then we can sort of see if there's things that we want to take on.
Right. I think the first order of business to study the most appropriate site for the facility, scalable size.
Sure.
I think the location is critical.
Yep.
Personally, I think Central Street's the right location. I see there's a land for it. Yeah, I think maybe we should put that into an upcoming agenda as a item for discussion with more detail. Bring Sean in. And I think Mr. Keith did a facility assessment on those two locations as well, so we can have a good idea of what needs to go.
Yeah, and I've certainly reviewed those. I just wanted to bring it to your attention that we did talk
good.
about it. I'd love to have your, if you have any new thoughts or things like that, and we can kind of go through what's there and if there's anything else you want to change.
You got it. Okay. Upcoming.
And that's all I got.
I'm just going to say that I have talked to Travis about inviting CRG, the project proponent for 555 Poppy Brook, before the select board. So Travis, I believe, is considering that, request on my part with town council, with the town planner, to vet that as a future agenda item. So I just wanted to put that out to you, John and Ben, that may be an agenda item in the near future.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Any other business this evening from the folks assembled on our Zoom call? Hearing none, at this point I will entertain a motion to adjourn to executive session. We will not be returning. Reason number 3, to discuss collective bargaining.
I'll make that motion.
I will second that.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
By polling, Mr. Stroud?
Aye.
Tina Hine, yes.
John
Aye.
Cronin, aye. That is it for this evening, Holliston. Thanks for joining us. We hope you have a pleasant evening and a great weekend. We will catch you next Monday evening. Good night.